I never thought I'd need a lawyer to protect myself from my own family, but here we are. My name's Lucas Bray. I'm 36, and for the first time in my life, I thought I was finally free. I had a decent job in software, a solid little home I could actually call mine and peace. No one hovering over my shoulder, no one criticizing my every move. Until my parents showed up at my door with my older brother Silas in tow and a not-so-subtle agenda. Let me rewind. I grew up in a household where the family dynamic was simple. Silas was the king, and I was the afterthought. He was 3 years older, and apparently that gave him automatic VIP access to everything: better birthday parties, more expensive clothes, a shiny new car at 17, and zero consequences. Meanwhile, I was the kid who got character building lectures and clearance shoes. Our parents, Dale and Miriam Bray, never even tried to hide it. Silas is the future of this family, my dad used to say. Future of what exactly? Entitlement, Nepo energy. I remember the moment it clicked for me. I was 15. Silas had crashed the first car they bought him and somehow walked away with a new one 2 weeks later. I asked if I could get driving lessons. My dad laughed and said, "You need to earn those things, Lucas." Years passed. The pattern held. Silas breezed through college on my parents' dime. I worked 2 part-time jobs and left school with $48K in student loans. He married a woman named Lauren, who gives off PTA, president with a dark, secret energy. My parents gifted them $25,000 for a housewarming. When I bought my own place 4 years later, my mom handed me a casserole dish and a "you'll figure it out" smile. And I did figure it out. I busted my ass in tech support, climbed the ranks, took certifications, freelanced, and lived on rice and beans when needed. After 15 years of pushing, saving, and praying my car wouldn't die, I bought a fixer-upper in a quiet neighborhood. 3 beds, 1 bath, big old trees lining the street. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I worked every weekend renovating it, repainted the walls, laid tile in the bathroom, and even built a home office with a view of the backyard. When I stood in the doorway after the last coat of paint dried, I thought, finally, something no one can take from me. I was wrong. 2 months after I moved in, my parents invited themselves over for dinner. I figured, fine, let them see what I've built. Maybe they'd actually say they were proud. Instead, my dad walked through the house like a building inspector. This countertop bit uneven. My mom, meanwhile, kept asking if I ever got lonely in such a big house. I brushed it off until dessert. That's when they hit me with it. "Lucas," my dad started, his voice low, like this was a boardroom deal. "Your mother and I think it would make more sense if Silas took over this house." I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" My mom leaned in. "Think about it. He has 2 kids, you're single, it's a lot of space for one person. You'd still have time to find something smaller." I stared at them like they were speaking another language. "You're talking like this isn't my house. I paid for this. Alone." Silas, who had apparently been eavesdropping in the kitchen, chose that moment to saunter in, grinning like a man who already had the keys. "It's not personal, man. It's just about what makes sense for the family." I stood up. "No, it's not happening. This house is mine. You're not getting it. Discussion over." And just like that, the mood shifted. My parents exchanged that disappointed look they'd perfected over decades. The "he's being difficult again" look. They left that night, and I paced my house until 2 a.m., trying to figure out what just happened. Was this a prank? Were they serious? Spoiler alert, they were very serious. The next morning, I called my oldest friend Tariq, who'd seen enough of my family dynamics to write a dissertation. I told him everything. Tariq didn't even sound shocked. "They're cornered, man. You've always been the backup plan. Now you've got something they want." And he was right. After that night, the pressure campaign began. My mom started sending passive-aggressive texts. "Family is about sharing, Lucas. Silas needs this more than you do." My dad called with speeches about legacy and duty. "You'll understand when you're older." Even Aunt June, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, chimed in. "In our family, the eldest son provides for the younger. You're lucky to even have a house." Then came the uninvited visits. Silas started showing up randomly, bringing Lauren and their kids like it was already their weekend home. They'd walk through, commenting on what they'd change. "We'll need to knock out this wall," Lauren said casually, tapping on my living room. "Excuse me." Their kids, 6 and 9, ran wild. One of them spilled juice on my new carpet. The other dug up a corner of my backyard because he wanted to find treasure. I reminded them again that this was not their house. "We understand you're attached," Lauren said, voice dripping in condescension. "Change is hard." They left. I changed the locks the next day. But things didn't stop there. 2 weeks later, I came home from a weekend trip and found muddy footprints across the entryway floor. My spare key, once hidden under a flower pot for emergencies, was missing. I checked my new security cam footage. Silas. He had let himself in while I was gone, his kids running through my home like it was a playground. That was it. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. "You're saying your parents and brother are trying to take your house while claiming it's for family unity?" she asked. "Yes." She didn't even flinch. "Unfortunately, I've seen worse. Let's get ahead of it." We filed a cease and desist against further unauthorized entry. I replaced all locks and installed motion-detecting lights. Then, like clockwork, my car, a beat-up but beloved '71 Chevy Chevelle I'd restored over the years, was keyed on both sides. Deep, jagged lines like someone had dragged a metal object from bumper to bumper. Guess whose kid had a rock in hand on the footage? Silas' youngest. And when I called Silas to demand $4,000 for repairs, "You're seriously making a big deal about a car?" No, I was making a big deal about my boundaries. So I filed a police report for property damage and submitted the footage. And that, friends, was just the beginning. I thought filing that police report would be the thing that scared them off. That finally they'd realize I wasn't bluffing. But nope. Silas and my parents weren't just stubborn. They were desperate in a way that made no sense at the time. And when people are desperate, they stop pretending to be civil. It started small. My mailbox got smashed. I replaced it. Then it got smashed again. My lawn was torn up, deep tire ruts left behind like someone drove in circles on purpose. Packages went missing. At first, I blamed random vandalism. Until my security cameras caught Silas' car creeping past my house at night. Once, it even stopped. The video showed him sitting there in the dark, lights off, just watching the house like a predator waiting for the right moment. It chilled me. I didn't sleep much that week. Then I got a call from my bank. "Hi, Mr. Bray. We're reaching out to confirm some details on a refinance application listing your property." I froze. "What application?" "The refinance submitted 2 days ago by Dale and Miriam Bray lists your house as secondary collateral." My voice came out flat. "They don't own this house." "I do. Alone." There was a long pause on the other end. "Yes, that's what flagged the system. We'll begin an internal investigation." After the call ended, I just sat there, completely still, staring at nothing. My own parents had tried to use my house, my home, as collateral for a loan, without telling me, without my signature. That wasn't just disrespect. That was fraud, identity theft. And still part of me wanted to believe it had to be some kind of mistake, a misunderstanding. But then I talked to Tariq. "Man," he said, "you really think this is a coincidence? They're drowning in something, and they're reaching for anything that floats, including your place." He offered to reach out to his cousin, who worked in county records. I gave him the go-ahead. In the meantime, I contacted a real estate attorney. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was doing backflips, replaying every suspicious thing from the past year. The pressure to give Silas the house, the non-stop visits, the property damage, the bank call. None of it felt random anymore. It felt calculated, or worse, planned. 3 days later, Tariq showed up at my house with a folder full of documents. "You need to see this," he said. Inside were county filings, property records, scanned deeds, and 2 things that turned my stomach. One was a fake family trust document that claimed all Bray family properties, including mine, had been merged into one asset pool. It was dated 3 years ago, before I even bought my home. The second was a quitclaim deed, backdated and forged, listing Silas and my parents as co-owners of my property. And guess who witnessed the signatures? Lauren. My name was on that paper too, except it wasn't my handwriting. And the signature looked like a bad imitation done by someone who watched me sign once and tried to copy it from memory. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. "They really tried to forge their way into your house," Tariq said. This isn't just greedy. This is criminal. We flipped through more pages. That's when the full picture came into view. My parents had been using their own house as a cash machine, refinancing it multiple times over the last decade. And all that money poured straight into Silas's string of failing businesses, a fitness app that never launched, a landscaping service that collapsed under debt, some scheme involving luxury Airbnbs in cities he'd never even visited. All of it failed. Every time. My parents kept bailing him out like it was their divine duty, until they ran out of equity. And now they wanted mine. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Done with playing the good son. Done pretending I didn't see what was right in front of me. Done letting these people take advantage of me while smiling to my face, yo. I met with my lawyer again. Showed her the documents, the bank call notes, the forged trust paperwork. She sat silently flipping through everything, her expression going from curious to horrified. "This is more than just attempted fraud," she said. "This is document falsification, forgery, identity theft, and financial abuse. You have a solid civil case and maybe even grounds for criminal charges if you want to go that route." I nodded. I'm not letting them take anything else. She prepared a cease and desist, including all the evidence and a warning of pending legal action. We also drafted paperwork for a restraining order just in case. Then came the part I'd been dreading, telling them. I didn't want to talk, but I also knew they'd deny everything unless confronted directly. So I made a decision. The next time Silas tried to show up, I'd be ready. Sure enough, 2 days later, my front doorbell rang. My camera pinged. "Silas." I opened the door but didn't let him in. "You need to stop showing up here," I said. "I'm not kidding. We need to talk," he said, all fake calm. "No," I cut in. "We don't. I know about the trust. I know about the forged deed. I know about the refinance application. You tried to steal my house, Silas, and I've got every piece of it documented." His face turned a shade paler. It's complicated. We were trying to help." "Help?" I nearly laughed. "You used my name, my house, and your wife signed documents she had no right to touch." He didn't respond, just stared, caught between panic and entitlement. "I've got a lawyer," I continued, "and your next communication better come through her, because if I see your name on anything else tied to my property, I will press charges. Fully. No negotiations. We're done." He backed away without a word. That night, I received a text from my mom. One line. "Please don't ruin the family over this." I didn't answer. They'd already done that themselves. A week passed in silence, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that hums under your skin, quiet on the outside, but heavy with something waiting to explode. I didn't go looking for a fight, but I wasn't going to run from one either. I'd spent my whole life being the one who backed down. This time, I wasn't moving. Then came the letter. A plain white envelope shoved under my door while I was out. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a printed invitation to a family meeting, hosted at my parents' house. Date, time, mandatory attendance. The word mandatory made me laugh out loud, like this was a job and they were still in charge of my schedule. But deep down, I knew I had to go. Not for them, but to end it. Face to face. Final line in the sand. I prepped for 3 days. My lawyer helped me organize everything into a binder: property, deeds, bank communications, proof of forgery, even stills from my security cameras. I had pages marked, tabs labeled. I treated it like a courtroom appearance, because in a way it was. Tariq insisted on coming with me, just in case, he said. People like them don't play fair. I didn't argue. When we arrived, the driveway was packed. Cousins I hadn't seen in years, my aunt, my uncle, even a couple family friends I didn't recognize right away. They weren't just having a meeting, they'd staged an intervention. I walked in and felt the shift instantly, like I was the villain walking into his own trial. My mom greeted me with this strained smile, all performative warmth. My dad gave me a stiff nod like he didn't know whether to hug me or punch me. Silas sat at the far end of the living room, legs crossed, arms folded, looking like he'd already written the ending in his head. My mom cleared her throat, dramatic as always, and started with this long monologue about family unity, legacy, togetherness. She kept using phrases like restore the bond and get things back on track as if someone else had driven this train off the rails. I didn't interrupt. I let them speak. Everyone. My father gave a speech too full of big words and moral posturing. He talked about sacrifices, about what he and Mom had done to keep the family intact. He never mentioned the fraud, never admitted to a single thing. Instead, he painted me as the one who turned my back on them. Finally, it was my turn. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't get emotional. I just opened the binder and laid it on the coffee table. This, I said, is what really happened. I walked them through it all. The forged trust, the quitclaim deed, the falsified loan application, the security footage, the bank's internal investigation. Page by page. No fluff, no opinions, just facts. At first, no one said a word. Then someone, I think it was my cousin Mark, asked, "Is this real?" I looked him straight in the eye. Every word. My mother finally cracked. "We did what we had to do. You were being stubborn. You weren't listening." "No," I said, cutting her off. I wasn't complying. There's a difference. Silas stood up, voice sharp. "You think this makes you the hero? You've always been bitter, Lucas. You've always hated that I was chosen," I said before he could finish. "Yeah, I know. You were the golden child. You got everything. Every bailout, every second chance. But now that the money's dried up and the lies caught up, you need something from me. And the answer's no." He clenched his jaw. "You're just trying to make us look bad." "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourselves." Then came the twist I didn't expect. Someone cleared their throat from the back of the room. My Uncle Dale's older brother. I hadn't seen him in years. He stepped forward, holding a folder of his own. "I was hoping I wouldn't need this," he said. "But clearly I do." He opened the folder and started pulling out copies of checks, loan agreements, and emails, everything showing that he'd loaned Silas over $70,000 in the last 5 years. Not $1 had been paid back. Silas went pale. My aunt gasped. A few cousins started whispering. And my dad, for the first time that day, looked genuinely rattled. My uncle didn't stop there. He turned to me. "I tried to stay out of it, Lucas. But when I found out they'd tried to leverage your house, I knew I couldn't keep quiet anymore. You're not the crazy one here. You're the only one who did the right thing." That was the moment everything cracked. The room turned. Fast. The same cousins who'd looked at me with suspicion minutes earlier now stared at Silas like he was a con artist. My mom tried to regain control, talking about how hard things had been, how they only wanted to protect the family. I looked right at her. "You didn't try to protect anything. You tried to take something you didn't earn, and you lied about it." She started crying. My dad stayed quiet. Silas left the room face blank. No apology, no acknowledgement, just retreat. I left soon after. Tariq drove us back, both of us silent for the first half of the ride. "You good?" he finally asked. I exhaled. Not good, but done. The next morning, my lawyer filed the fraud complaint formally with the county. We submitted copies of everything to the state attorney general's office too, just in case. I didn't care about seeing them punished. I just wanted a wall between me and their chaos. And then came the fallout. Word spread fast. My parents' reputation, something they guarded like a family heirloom, was in shreds. Friends stopped calling. The country club quietly asked them not to renew their membership. My dad lost his spot on the neighborhood board. Their home, already deep in debt, went into foreclosure within months. Silas tried one last move. He sent me a message through a cousin saying he wanted to talk, man to man. I ignored it. There was nothing left to say. A few weeks later, I got a notification from the courthouse the restraining order was approved. My family was now legally required to stay 500 feet away from me and my home. For the first time in months, I slept without checking the cameras twice. I stopped looking over my shoulder every time I pulled into the driveway. The anxiety that had lived in my chest like a second heartbeat started to fade. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like breathing. After the restraining order was granted, everything got quiet. Not peaceful quiet, more like the eerie stillness after a storm when the damage settles, but the air still feels tense. I wasn't celebrating. There was no parade, no high five moment, just silence. The kind that felt earned but heavy. I didn't realize how much space they'd taken up in my life until the noise stopped. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up dreading a phone call, a knock at the door, or some new invasion of my privacy. I could breathe, really breathe. But even in the quiet, echoes lingered. Small reminders. The half-sanded patch on my back fence where Silas's kid tried to carve his name. The stain on the living room rug from the juice box Lauren's daughter spilled. A tiny dent in the drywall where someone's shoulder bumped it during one of those just visiting drop-ins. The house was mine, but their fingerprints had lingered in corners I didn't notice until I was alone. So I started fixing things not out of anger, but to reclaim every inch. I patched the wall, replaced the rug, painted over the door frame where someone had scrawled Uncle Silas rules in permanent marker. And as I worked, something strange happened. I stopped feeling like I was guarding something. For months, I'd been living in defense. Now I was building again. Slowly, quietly, for me. Around that time, I got a call from Tariq. "You hear the latest?" he asked. I told him I hadn't. I hadn't checked family gossip in weeks. Turns out my parents had officially lost their house. It hit the market under foreclosure, then disappeared into bank inventory. No warning. Just a sign taken down and a silence that spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Someone saw a moving truck. Another said they were renting a condo across town, now smaller and plain. A huge downgrade from the life they were used to. But they weren't the only ones spiraling. Silas was worse. His last business venture had shut down without notice. The website was gone, the social pages wiped. I heard he'd tried getting a loan under a new company name, but banks flagged it because of his history and because my lawyer had shared our fraud complaint with local lenders. His name was radioactive now. Apparently, Lauren had started working at a chain real estate office downgraded from her boutique firm. There were whispers she'd been quietly let go after someone tipped off HR about her role in the forged documents. I didn't know if it was true. Didn't care. I wasn't keeping score. But karma didn't need my help. It was moving just fine on its own. One afternoon, about 3 months after the meeting, I stopped at the grocery store on my way home. I was scanning the produce aisle thinking about dinner when I heard someone say my name. I looked up, and there she was, my mom. She looked older. Not just aged, but tired. Clothes that didn't quite fit. Hair pulled back without the usual polish. She started walking toward me, then hesitated. I stood still. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just waited. She stopped halfway down the aisle, close enough to speak, but far enough not to trigger the order. "Lucas," she said, her voice hoarse. "We don't have anywhere to go." I blinked. "What does that have to do with me?" She flinched, but kept her tone level. "We're your family." That word family, it hit different now. It used to mean obligation. Now it sounded hollow. I looked her in the eye. "You tried to steal from me, lie to me, humiliate me. You didn't act like family when you forged my name, or when you let Silas run through my house like he already owned it." Her face fell, but she didn't deny it. She just looked tired. "We made mistakes," she said. "We lost everything." I tilted my head. "You didn't lose it. You gambled it. And now the game's over." She stared at me like she didn't recognize who I'd become. But the truth was, I wasn't new. I was just done hiding. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just turned and walked away. That night, I told my lawyer what happened. She reminded me that any further contact, even a grocery store run-in, was a technical violation. I could report it, but I didn't. I didn't want punishment. I wanted distance. They weren't worth another court date. Later that week, I got an email from my bank. The fraud investigation had concluded. The refinance attempt by my parents had officially been marked as malicious falsification of property ownership. In plain terms, they were now flagged in the system. Any financial institution using that verification service would now see a permanent alert tied to their names. I asked what that meant practically. The banker replied, "It means they'll never borrow again without this coming up. Ever." I stared at the screen for a long time, not smiling, not satisfied, just quiet. That was the part no one tells you about revenge. The fire, the fury, it all dies out. What's left is cold. Still, it's not triumph. It's peace. And peace, real peace, is unsettling after a life full of noise. Weeks turned into months. I kept working, put my energy into renovating the last parts of the house, built a new fence, installed a smarter security system. Not because I needed protection anymore, but because I wanted to close every gap, seal every breach. One day, I stood in the backyard, looked at the garden I'd planted, and realized I hadn't thought about Silas in days. That felt like progress. Around the same time, I started seeing someone. Nothing dramatic, just coffee dates and bookstore wandering. Her name was Elise. Kind eyes, sharp wit. She never asked too much too soon. Just let things unfold naturally. When I finally told her about what had happened with my family, she didn't flinch. Just nodded and said, "Sounds like you finally chose yourself." That stuck with me. Chose myself. Yeah, maybe for the first time. A few more months passed. My promotion came through. Senior Solutions Architect. Better pay, more autonomy. My boss said I had the calm of someone who's handled chaos. I didn't correct him. He wasn't wrong. I'd just handled chaos in the shape of people who shared my last name. But the most surprising part, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for the next blow. The story wasn't about them anymore. It was about what I built in the wreckage. I didn't expect to hear from Silas again, especially not the way it happened. Nearly a year had passed since everything went down. The restraining order was still in place. My life was finally calm, and the chaos that once followed me like a shadow had mostly faded. I thought he'd taken the hint, thought they'd all finally retreated to whatever hole they crawled into. But people like Silas don't go quiet forever. They wait, and then they show up when they think the dust has settled enough to rewrite the story. It was a Thursday, normal day. I'd just finished a long project at work and stopped for coffee before heading home. The barista handed me my drink with a smile, and I turned around only to find him standing there. Silas. In the middle of the cafe. Hands in his pockets, eyes low like he was trying to seem harmless. For a second, I froze. Not out of fear, out of disbelief. He looked different. Thinner, slouched. The confident tilt he always walked with was gone. But what hadn't changed was the way he stood between me and the exit, like he still believed he could control the direction of a conversation just by showing up. "I just want 5 minutes," he said, voice low. "Not here," I replied. "You know there's a legal order." He nodded. "I won't come near you again after this. Just hear me out." I didn't agree. I just stood there holding my coffee like a shield. He took that as permission. "We're staying with Lauren's parents now," he began, eyes darting to the floor. "It's cramped. The kids are having a hard time. I lost the last investor. And Mom and Dad, they're not doing great. You know all of that, though." I didn't speak. He continued. "I've had time to think about everything. And I know we crossed a line. I know we hurt you. I wish I'd seen it sooner." His words were hesitant, like he was reading from a script he barely believed in. "We were desperate. That's not an excuse, but I guess I thought if I kept it in the family, it wasn't really stealing. I thought you'd understand eventually." I took a slow sip of my drink. It wasn't good anymore. Cold, like this conversation. "You forged my name," I said evenly. "You used my house to cover debts you created, then tried to gaslight me into giving it away. What part of that am I supposed to understand?" He rubbed the back of his neck like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. "I'm not asking for anything now. I just wanted to say it. That I get it. That you were right." I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't the enemy I'd fought all that time. He was what was left after his lies crumbled. Just a man who never learned how to take care of himself. And now that his enablers were broke and the mask had fallen off, he finally had to face himself. You know, I said there was a time I would have done anything to hear those words. Back when I was still trying to be part of this so-called family. But that version of me, he doesn't exist anymore. He nodded again, slower this time. I figured. Then he took a step back. Good luck, Lucas. I didn't say it back, just turned and walked away. That night, I told Elise about it. She didn't interrupt. She just let me vent, her hand resting lightly over mine as I replayed the moment in the cafe. Do you think he meant it? I asked. I think he meant what he could, she said. But that doesn't mean it's your job to carry it. That hit something deep. For so long, I thought healing meant fixing things, making peace. But maybe healing was just letting go of what was never mine to carry. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Not a summons, not a notice. A letter, handwritten, from my mother. I held it in my hand for a long time before opening it. The envelope was creased, the handwriting shaky. Inside, she wrote about how they were living in a rental now, how my father had picked up part-time work as a school janitor, how the family dinners were quiet now, just silence over cheap food and blame that hung in the air. And then at the bottom, a sentence that made my stomach twist. We don't want forgiveness, she wrote. We just don't want to disappear. I read that line again and again, not because it changed anything, but because it revealed everything. That was the truth of it. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were scared of being forgotten, of losing their place in a world where reputation used to shield them from consequence. It wasn't love. It was fear. A fear they now expected me to fix. But I couldn't, and I wouldn't. I wrote back only once. A short note, no emotions, no venom, just truth. You disappeared the moment you chose him over me. I'm not erasing you. You did that yourselves. Then I put the note in the mailbox and didn't think about it again. In the months that followed, my life got full in quiet, beautiful ways. Elise and I started talking about moving in together. Not rushing it, just letting things grow. I started volunteering at a local tech mentoring program, helping young people learn coding and get real jobs. Giving back not because I had to prove anything, but because I had something to give. And one weekend, I took the Chevelle out on the road. Long drive, music up, windows down. Somewhere in the middle of nowhere, I pulled off to the side and just sat in the stillness. The kind of silence that isn't heavy, just open, clean. I thought about everything that had happened, not with bitterness, not even with pain, just with clarity. They had tried to take everything I'd built not because they hated me, but because they never saw me. Not really. I was just a backup plan, a resource, a fallback. The invisible brother who became inconvenient when he started standing his ground. But I wasn't invisible anymore. I had a name, a house, a life, and none of it had their fingerprints on it now. 6 months later, I found myself sitting on my front porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise spread across my lawn like a quiet promise. It was one of those rare mornings where everything felt still, not empty, just full in a softer way. Birds chirped like they were in on a secret. The breeze carried that early summer warmth, the kind that settles into your skin and makes you feel grounded. And for once, there was no pit in my stomach, no silent countdown until the next boundary was pushed. My home was finally just that, mine. I hadn't heard from Silas or my parents since that last letter. No more run-ins, no new tricks. Maybe the weight of everything had finally caught up to them, or maybe they'd just worn out their options. Either way, the quiet felt earned. I hadn't taken revenge. I hadn't burned it all down. But I'd refused to bend, and that had been enough. My lawyer confirmed the fraud cases were officially closed. No charges pressed beyond the fines and probation, but the legal record was set in stone. They couldn't take another loan in my name, couldn't file false documents, couldn't touch my life again. There was no dramatic trial, no movie, ending. Just accountability. Quiet, cold, permanent. And that was enough too. I spent the next few weeks finishing what I'd started a year ago. Reseeded the yard, built a new gate at the front of the driveway, tore down the old shed and replaced it with a proper workspace. Nothing fancy, just a clean place for my tools and ideas. Every improvement I made was like peeling off a layer of their presence, a reclamation piece by piece. Elise moved in a month later. We did it slowly at our own rhythm. She brought books and plants and laughter that didn't echo off old ghosts. We spent late nights curled up in the living room, candles flickering, records playing in the background. She never asked me to explain everything. She just let me be who I was. And in her presence, I wasn't the guy with the broken family anymore. I was just Lucas, a man who'd built something solid and finally let himself live in it. One evening, we hosted a small get-together, just a few friends, some coworkers, and Rick, who showed up with a case of beer and that knowing grin he'd had since middle school. He pulled me aside during a lull in the conversation, looked around the house, then back at me. "You ever think it'd end like this?" he asked. I shook my head. "I didn't think it would end at all," I said. "I just wanted to survive it." He nodded, then lifted his bottle in a quiet toast. "You didn't just survive it. You rewrote the ending." After everyone left and the house settled into silence again, I found myself walking through each room, remembering the nights I'd paced, unsure if I was doing the right thing. The mornings I'd woken up to find new damage, new lines crossed. The hours I'd spent doubting myself, wondering if peace was even possible with people like that in my life. And now there was just calm. Not perfection, just calm. The final piece came unexpectedly. A letter arrived, not handwritten this time, but formal. From my parents' attorney. A notification that they'd officially removed me from their estate planning documents. No inheritance, no claims, no further legal ties. At the bottom, a single line. "This concludes our affairs." I stared at it for a moment, then folded it up and slid it into a drawer. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel free either. I'd already made peace with that disconnection long ago. But now it was sealed. Some people spend their whole lives trying to fix broken things. I used to be one of them. I thought loyalty meant sacrifice. That being family meant bending until you snapped. But I learned something in the ashes of all that chaos. Sometimes the only way to heal is to let go completely. Not with hate, not with revenge, just release. The hardest boundaries aren't the ones you build to keep people out. They're the ones you uphold when those people are your own blood. People ask sometimes coworkers, new friends, even Elise's sister, if I still talk to my family. I just smile and say, "Not really." I don't tell them about the restraining orders, the legal filings, the late nights staring at camera feeds waiting for the next violation. I don't need to. That part of the story is mine alone. Not a wound, just a scar. Proof that I got through something and came out the other side stronger. A year later, on the anniversary of the confrontation at my parents' house, Elise and I took the Chevelle out for a long drive. Windows down, music playing, the wind moving through us like time itself. We stopped at a diner halfway up the mountain, ordered pie and coffee, and watched the world move without us for a while. She reached across the table and said, "You know, I've never seen someone protect their peace like you do." I smiled. Took me long enough to earn it. That night, back at home, I stood in the doorway of the garage, staring at the car I'd restored with my own hands. I ran my fingers along the curve of the hood, remembering the scratch Silas's son left. It was gone now, the paint perfect again, but I hadn't forgotten. Not out of anger, but as a reminder. Every inch of that car had been brought back to life through patience, time, and determination, just like me. This story didn't have a neat resolution. No tearful reunions, no sudden apologies, no last-minute redemption arcs. It had something better: truth, and peace, and freedom. The kind that comes when you finally stop trying to earn the approval of people who only ever wanted control. So, if you're out there, someone stuck between love and survival, between guilt and clarity, Let me say this, you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your peace. Family is more than blood. It's respect, it's safety, it's choice. I chose myself. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't running anymore. Story 2. I canceled everything because my fiancé and her bridesmaids were planning to make fun of me during our wedding in secret, and what followed permanently damaged her reputation. Amy, a 27-year-old woman, and I, a 28-year-old man, were set to tie the knot last week. In all honesty, I'm still attempting to comprehend what transpired. After 4 years of dating, I genuinely believed she was my soul match. At my friend's barbecue, I got to know Amy. She was an extremely gregarious girl who could brighten whatever space she entered. To be honest, she was much over my capabilities. Beautiful, intelligent, and capable of making everyone laugh. In fact, our first date was hilarious. In an attempt to impress her, I went her to a posh restaurant, but our reservation was ruined. She recommended that we buy hot dogs from a street seller and eat them in the park rather than becoming upset. I realized then that she was unique. It was fantastic for the first 3 years. Similar to the type of connection you see in those corny blogs about our relationships when everyone accuses us of being too ideal. When things got difficult, she was there for me no matter what. Amy took care of everything when my grandpa passed away last year. She made sure I ate, phoned my job to arrange for time off, and even arranged all the family belongings so I could simply concentrate on my grief. When I had important meetings at work, she would slip little messages in my lunch. She knew I missed home-cooked meals, so she even learned how to prepare my mom's lasagna recipe. Additionally, Amy was a lot of fun to be around. On these sporadic adventure days, we would simply drive there without making any plans. She taught me to appreciate life more and to quit being so serious all the time. She always added joy to our gaming nights, which is why my friends adored her. Though she never said it, I could tell that my sister and Amy didn't get along. However, it wasn't a problem until around 6 months ago when things began to change. At start, it was little matters. She began to mention her ex-boyfriend Tom more and more, as if she were watching TV, and she would remark at random, "Oh, Tom loved this show." Or Tom would never be able to comprehend such shows. He was quite simple. I didn't give it much thought at first. Everyone occasionally discusses their ex-partners, don't they? Then she began to make her prank worse. It used to be enjoyable jokes and pranks that we both laughed at, but Amy always enjoyed them. Such like this. Before a significant meeting, she once changed all of my socks to bright pink ones. She knew I had these shoes that no one would ever see, so it was humorous. Recently, however, her joke began to feel different. I mean, rather than being as thrilled about my victories as she used to be, I was nearly thrilled when I received this enormous promotion that I had been aiming for 2 years. She spoke at my party in this strange way. In front of my parents, employer, and coworkers, she stood there and said that I was probably simply lucky and that my boss felt sorry for me. As she chuckled, everyone simply stood there looking uncomfortable. That is not what the previous Amy would have done. She was my biggest supporter once. The proposal is when I first became aware that anything was wrong. I had saved money for this upscale restaurant, planned it for months, bought her favorite flowers, and even had the restaurant assist set up this special dessert with the ring. She spent 5 minutes pretending she didn't want to marry me when I proposed. I just sat there thinking, oh, I'm not sure, when we were the center of attention in the restaurant. She laughed and said it was only a joke until she eventually said yes. Something didn't feel right. The previous Amy would have agreed for a little moment, but she would never have allowed me to sit there for so long feeling foolish. Looking back now is strange. Her spontaneity, sense of humor, and extroverted nature are all qualities that I used to like about her. She began to feel different, as though her actions were now motivated more by attention or amusement from others than by making us both happy. Whenever I attempted to discuss how her recent pranks were making me feel, she would just respond, "OMG, darling," be able to accept a joke. Or, "What's causing your sensitivity, Amy?" in the past would have paid attention. In the past, we could discuss anything. My best buddy also began to notice the shift. "Dude, is Amy okay?" he would remark. Her behavior has changed. But since I thought about how wonderful things used to be, I continued coming up with excuses. Perhaps she was simply anxious about the wedding, her job, or anything else I kept telling myself. The Amy with whom I fell in love was a wonderful, kind individual who inspired me to improve myself. When I was having a rough day, she would surprise me with my favorite munchies. Do you recall the weird things I described months ago that always made me chuckle when I was feeling low? That's why I didn't realize things were changing for so long. You don't want to see the negative aspects of someone you love so much. But the changes continued, Guy. Now that I'm looking back, I can see these warning signs appearing one after the other. It's similar to viewing a game replay in which the conclusion is already known. When you're in the midst of it, you just hope that things will return to normal, even if all the warning flags are suddenly so clear. In any case, things became somewhat strange around 2 months before to the wedding. It's that strange feeling when you know something is off but are unable to identify it. Amy began discussing her former partner. I'll refer to him as Tom, much more than normal. She would constantly bring him up in ways that were a backhanded praise. For example, she would say, "This is why you're so much better than Tom," when I told her about this new project at work at our meal. He was hardly able to do simple math. Here you are, overseeing initiatives worth millions of dollars. Or I would be looking at the nutrition labels while we were grocery shopping, trying to eat healthily, etc. Tom never cared about this stuff, she would say. He simply took whatever was the least expensive. He was quite straightforward. It began occurring more and more, and at first I thought maybe she was simply trying to cheer me up or something. She'd add, "Tom would never watch stuff like this when we were watching a space documentary or something. For him, it was too difficult. He spent the entire day watching sports." But it was strange the way she stated it, as if she had forgotten how easy he was. Then I saw that she was constantly on her phone even when she was watching TV and eating supper. She would receive these texts and quickly put her phone away if I passed by, even as we were attempting to arrange the wedding. Even though I'm not normally jealous, something didn't feel right. Her phone flashed up while she slept off on the couch one evening while watching a movie. That was all it took, even though it was only for a moment. Tom. I felt sick to my stomach. The screen flickered over the preview of the message. "Before I depart, I can't wait to see you tomorrow." Every element, including how his name appeared so nonchalantly on her computer, caught my attention. While we were engaged, how could she still have his number? The tiny, innocuous emoji suddenly has a lot of importance. I was reluctant to unload. I made an effort to breathe and convince myself that it might not be malicious. Perhaps she was simply running into an old acquaintance. Perhaps it had to do with the wedding, but my gut told me something my intellect wouldn't believe. I began to pay more attention after that. How long was she gone, and where did she go? The few discrepancies in her account. Something wasn't adding up, even though she said that she had several meetings with her bridesmaids to organize the wedding. I made the decision to follow her one day. Like some obsessive boyfriend in a terrible movie, I felt like a fool for doing it. But I had to know. I had to check it myself. She parked her car in front of a coffee shop downtown and went inside. No wedding coordinators or bridesmaids. Only him. At a table by the window, Tom was already there waiting for her. I remained outdoors, standing like a shadow in the darkness near a lamppost. As I watched them, my heart thumped in my ears. They weren't only conversing. They were doing more than catching up. They appeared at ease, known like two historical figures, as if they had been doing this for some time. She dipped her head in the manner she usually did when flirting, twisted a lock of hair around her finger, and flashed that simple, personal smile that was once just for me when she laughed at anything he said. My hands were clenched into fists as I felt ill. I had the want to storm through the door and confront her in front of everyone, but I was unable to breathe or move. Like some fool who didn't see this coming, I just stood there and watched through the window thinking he was marrying the love of his life, when in fact she was already slipping away. I stayed out of her way when she returned. I wanted to see how far this would go, but perhaps I should have. I observed more throughout the course of the following several weeks. She would pretend to be out dress shopping with her mother, but her mother would contact me to inquire about the specifics of the wedding at the same time she claimed to have late meetings at work. Her coworker, with whom I am acquainted, pointed out that she had left early that day. Even her bridesmaids were behaving strangely. Every time something related to the wedding comes up, they give me these glances as if they knew something I didn't. When I passed by, they would be whispering and then quickly stop. Everyone but one of her pals. I'll refer to her as Jen. She works at my firm and is a modest bridesmaid. When the other bridesmaids were laughing over something, she constantly looked awkward. I recall Amy complaining that Tom could never afford a property like this when we were at the wedding location making some preparations. She had this strange tone as if she found it endearing even though he was still living in his college apartment with roommates. "That's why you're so much better, babe," she added, glancing at me. "You're genuinely ambitious." Tom was pretty plain. However, her speech was straightforward. She seemed to be recalling a pleasant memory. That day, Jen drew me aside with a concerned expression. She began to suggest something along the lines of, "Look, you should do this." However, Jen quickly left when Amy returned at that very moment. When I heard Amy talking on the phone in our backyard, it was the last straw. She assumed I was at work, but I had a headache and had gone home early. "Yeah, he has no idea," she remarked, giggling at something. "He believes I'm at meetings to arrange a wedding." Then she quickly hung up after catching a glimpse of me through the glass. Tried to act as though she was discussing a surprise for me with her sister. At that moment, I realized our relationship was ended. Prior to any of the wedding-related events, I was aware of her foolish prank intentions and understood exactly what was happening with her and Tom. I was aware that we were over. The trust simply vanished. Here's the problem, though. I remained silent. I wanted to see what she had planned, call me petty. All of these private meetings, strange remarks about Tom and giddy bridesmaids. There was an impending event, and I sensed that it would be something significant because Amy loves pulling practical jokes. I simply didn't anticipate it to be that way. In hindsight, perhaps I ought to have simply addressed her. Perhaps I ought to have canceled the wedding at that time. However, I'm actually relieved that I didn't. Thus, I found myself waiting in my car outside the coffee shop where Amy was meeting Tom once more, approximately 3 weeks before to the wedding. And I simply knew that I had to take action. Normally, I'm not the kind to make plans. To be honest, Amy was usually the one who planned everything in our relationship, but I had a gut feeling that I needed help. I gave my friend Mike a call. These days, Mike works as a corporate lawyer and is always narrating bizarre tales about divorce cases. He has contributed. We attended college together, and he has direct experience with Amy's antics. For example, at his birthday party, she embarrassed him in front of his whole legal office by pretending to be a singing Telegram user. After that, he never really liked her. So I saw Amy chuckle at whatever Tom was saying and called him. "I need your aid, dude. Amy is probably planning something for the wedding, and I don't think it will work out." After a minute of silence, Mike said, "Come to my office now." I will always remember sitting in his opulent office and listening to everything he had to say. After I was done, he gave me a serious look and said, "We need insurance." After that, he took out this legal pad and began writing. "Look," he said, "I can't stop her from doing whatever she's planning, but if she does try anything, we can make sure she regrets it." We drafted this utterly phony prenuptial agreement in his office for about 4 hours. Although it looks very official, Mike claimed it wouldn't stand up in court for even 5 minutes. Contained a lot of legal jargon that I couldn't even comprehend. This particular provision regarding public humiliation was crucial. On my phone, I still have a picture of it. All jointly arranged financial commitments shall be instantly void, and the offending party will be required to publicly apologize if either party intentionally embarrasses or degrades the other party in public prior to the signing of this contract. In order to make it appear like one of those 50-page contracts that no one ever reads, Mike even included some fictitious case law references along with all these intricate definitions of what constitutes financial responsibility and public humiliation. The finest aspect. To make it appear more official, he had his secretary notarize it and place this official-looking stamp on it. Amy would simply sign anything that was placed in front of her. She also acknowledged that she had never read the contract for her own apartment. She wouldn't be able to tell it was phony, Mike remarked. I gave the prenuptial agreement to my best man, Dan, to keep in this black folder, just in case I advised him to carry it with him to the wedding. I felt somewhat bad because Dan, who has known me since we were children, could sense how anxious I was the entire time we were doing this, even if he thought I was being paranoid. As if I could have gone too far. Perhaps I was simply being suspicious. However, I would recall that Amy continued to see Tom behind my back to lie about her plans and to act strangely among her bridesmaids. And unless anything came up at the wedding, I had no intention of using it. One day, my coworker Jen, who was a bridesmaid, showed up at my workplace looking quite anxious. She began to talk about how she was unable to remain silent any longer. Amy, however, made a phone call at that very time. Jen's expression at seeing Amy's name appear. Whatever was coming, I knew it was bad. Additionally, I began to notice more things about the house. In the bathroom, while the shower was running, Amy began making these lengthy phone calls. She quickly shut down her laptop. She was erasing text messages while she thought I was sleeping, according to the one occasion I entered the room. The strange part was that she occasionally showed additional kindness as well. For example, suggesting that we watch my favorite movies or bringing home my favorite takeaway at random. In hindsight, I believe she was experiencing guilt. Or perhaps she was only attempting to confuse me. I'm not sure. I recall sitting at my parents' house the night before the wedding. Amy requested that we avoid meeting one another before to the wedding. There was a part of me that hoped I would never have to utilize the black folder with the prenuptial agreement. As if I were mistaken about everything. Perhaps Amy was only preparing a ridiculous surprise. I was glancing at the binder when my mother came in. She could sense something wasn't right, but she didn't know what was in it. You know, if you're not sure, you don't have to go through with this, she remarked as she sat down next to me. I just assured her that everything was well. That evening, I instructed Dan to keep the folder near throughout the ceremony and placed it in his luggage. Neither of us was laughing when he joked that it was like in the movies when someone always objections at the wedding. I kept thinking about the folder while I was getting dressed the following morning, hoping I would need it, but yet felt strangely at ease knowing it was there in case. In fact, the wedding morning was ideal. As in strangely ideal. Everything about the location was stunning. Amy made sure every decoration was just the way she wanted it. I kept wondering that perhaps I was mistaken about everything when I was getting ready with my groomsmen. Perhaps I was simply being suspicious. My best man, Dan, was constantly examining the folder as if it were his job. Every few minutes, he would check on his suitcase to make sure it was still there. He was so scared that my other guys were making fun of him, assuming he was looking for the rings. Even before the ceremony began, my mother was in tears. Happy tears, she thought. My tie was good, but my dad kept straightening it. In hindsight, I believe they both recognized something was wrong, but chose not to speak out. I recall seeing everyone take their seats while I stood at the altar. Amy's bridesmaids were whispering to one another and laughing. Everyone except Jen, who appeared to be on the verge of vomiting. She refused to give me a glance. Everyone sprang to their feet as soon as the music began to play. To be honest, Amy looked stunning as she and her father entered. Actually, everything was flawless, which only made the subsequent events worse. The ceremony began as usual. The priest went about his business, discussing commitment, love, and other such topics. In fact, I was beginning to feel foolish about carrying that prenuptial agreement in Dan's suitcase. Then, just before we were to exchange vows, we reached the vows. Amy did something where she took the priest's microphone. He was really perplexed, but she simply smiled broadly and told him not to worry. Then, as if presenting a game show or something, she says, beaming, I have a small surprise planned for my amazing soon-to-be hubby. My stomach fell. Dan quickly placed his hand on the folder in his backpack. My dad straightened up in his chair and I noticed it. With a broad smile, Amy turns to address each of our visitors and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the true love of my life." As if he were in a movie or something. The guy Tom enters the venue through the open doors at the rear. While everyone is turning around in their seats trying to figure out what's going on, he's just walking down the aisle with this dumb smile on his face. You could hear my mother's gasp from the other side of the room. In fact, my sister got to her feet as if she were about to fight. "Oh no," quite loudly exclaimed one of my aunts. Amy wasn't finished, though. She is grinning as if she had just received a prize or something, and she begins to talk about how she couldn't say "I do" without first getting Tom's approval because he played such a significant role in her life, and they had been chatting a lot recently. Then, like we're pals or something, this moron named Tom approaches the altar and gives me a back pat. I wanted to knock him out for the smile he's wearing. The majority of the bridesmaids are laughing as if this is the most hilarious thing they have ever witnessed. The priest seemed to wish to vanish. Now Jen is truly weeping with tears streaming down her cheeks. Amy wasn't finished, though. Not even close. "Oh, and I have something else to show everyone," she says, taking out her phone. She began looking through her bridesmaids' group chat. "Look," she adds, pointing to her screen, "babe. This tiny pool has been in use. I've started placing bets with the females. I swear that for a moment when I was reading these texts, my brain simply stopped functioning. These females who were meant to assist Amy in organizing our wedding had been placing real bets on her ability to carry it out. Before the ceremony, one of her bridesmaids had wagered $200 that Amy would pretend to change her mind. I sobbed at the altar as someone had 150 on me. Lisa had placed a $300 wager that Amy would do something spectacular. In other words, they were betting on a football game rather than a wedding, and they had a complete spreadsheet with odds and everything. The life of someone. The worst thing. Messages from months ago were among them. This was not an impromptu joke. This had been months in the making. All those meetings to organize the wedding. Most likely, they were scheming ways to make me seem bad while they sat about. Amy giggling and pointed out various bets while she scrolled through the thread. Rachel nearly got it right, you see. "I'll bring a surprise guest," she said. Isn't that close enough to qualify Tom? He's still there laughing like this is the greatest thing he's ever seen while glancing at the phone over Amy's shoulder. "You really went all out for this one man," he adds. Some of the visitors begin murmuring as I glance around the room. Naturally, people are documenting this as I can see phones come out. It's likely that this will be shared on social media within 5 minutes. Amy is waiting for me to chuckle while she stands there in her immaculate white dress. I meant to dismiss this as simply another one of her tricks. As if she hadn't just ruined our connection between us in front of everyone we knew. She prods me in the side and says, "Come on, babe. You're not angry, are you? It's only a joke." Unless she glances at Tom and they both start laughing again, Tom isn't really going to protest or anything. When I look at Dan, he has already taken the folder out of his backpack halfway, but Amy hasn't finished yet. "Oh, should I tell them about the backup plan?" she asks, turning to face the visitors. In case he did become angry, I realized then that this was more than a mischievous joke. Amy wasn't just being herself here. This was blatantly harsh. She had been preparing how to make me seem bad in front of everyone I cared about for months. Her pals, her ex, and most likely half of the others in this room were all participating. I turned to face her as she stood there beaming with pride. Additionally, I no longer saw the girl with whom I had fallen in love. I came into someone who believed my emotions were a farce. Someone who prefers to be laughed at rather than loved. At that point, I made the decision to give her a show if she wanted to. I gave her the most composed grin I've ever had in my life. In fact, she returned the smile, presumably believing that I was finally cracking the joke. I looked at the priest, who, to be honest, seemed like he wanted to quit the church right then. I say that very respectfully. Is that table ready for us to sign the marriage license? I have to quickly get something. The priest simply gestures toward this small table off to the side, presumably fearing that I'm going to make things worse. I approach Dan. Everyone seems to be holding their breath since the room is suddenly very quiet. Amy is still grinning broadly, but it's clear that she's becoming perplexed. Her script did not call for this. Mike helped me prepare this black folder, which I take out. It seems really official. I raise it for everyone to see. I say this in my finest meeting presentation voice, ladies and gentlemen. I want to share a paper with my beloved fiancé before we proceed. Amy's head tilts like a dog in confusion. Hold on, what? I make my way back toward the altar. I'm taking my sweet time. I'm not even shaking my hands. I'm just prepared. See, Amy? I say this quite calmly, as if I were speaking to a child. Before the wedding, I had a little agreement drafted by my lawyer. You know, just in case you ever made the decision to do anything similar. In order for everyone to see the official-looking stamp at the bottom, I hold up the contract. Mike's secretary placed that one there. Amy's face begins to get pale. What on earth is that? She queries. Her smiles were finally beginning to show. I pretend to turn the pages and remark, "Oh, just a little clause. Look at this section right here." It declares that all joint financial commitments, including the wedding honeymoon and shared assets, are instantly invalid if one partner publicly humiliates the other before signing the marriage certificate. The visitors let out a collective gasp similar to what happens in movies when the murderer is revealed. Amy is now blinking rapidly as if she's trying to wake up from a nightmare. Hold on, what? It's not true. That isn't possible. Oh, it's genuine. Using my inner lawyer, I say. Additionally, it mandates that the offending party publicly apologize in front of all of our visitors. At last, Tom stops grinning. You can't be serious, dude. Isn't this a joke? I turned to face him and I smiled broadly at him. Yes, Tom, I do take pranks extremely seriously. Amy is now perspiring since you were involved in the planning of this one. Her flawless makeup is starting to seem a touch sloppy. This is insane, darling. Actually, you're not angry, are you? I said the line at that point. Ever since I saw her with Tom at that coffee shop, I had been mentally practicing. What would make me angry? This is hilarious, Amy. I mean, it's all part of the pleasure. I loudly snapped the folder closed. I'm calling off the wedding altogether. Dead quiet. From the other side of the room, it sounded like a pin dropping. Amy's flawless grin breaks. Hold on, what? Oh, I reply, tucking the folder under my arm. Don't seem so surprised. You made your joke. It's my time now. The wedding is off. Whispers and gasps cause the room to literally erupt. The priest retreats from us as if we were both insane. At last, the bridesmaids stop laughing. In about 2 seconds, Amy's face changes from pale white to blazing crimson. She responds, "You're kidding." But her voice is suddenly trembling. Am I turn to face Dan. Would you do the honors, man Dan? He is an absolute legend. He takes out his phone, presses play, and drives off. Jack begins blaring from the speakers in the arena. Some visitors even burst out laughing. Others simply sit in disbelief. Some rise and begin to depart. Well done. In all honesty, Amy seemed on the verge of fainting. Are you not being serious? You're not walking away, she says repeatedly. I simply smile. I really am. I look to my parents. For the first time all day, Dad seems proud, and Mom is genuinely smiling now despite her tears. We're probably done here. I say. My dad gets up right away and begins informing everyone that the wedding is ended. The pragmatic one always. My father. After that, I look back at Tom, who is attempting to gradually move away from the altar. You like robbing people of their fiancés, don't you, Tom? Congratulations, you have her all to yourself. At last, something removes the sneer from his face. Amy looks at him as she turns around. Tell him it's dumb, Tom, but he's already on his way out. I believe I'm going to leave. The bridesmaids are actually all staring at their feet right now. Some of the visitors are laughing out loud. Amy, too. Amy's entire world seemed to have fallen apart. You can't simply abandon me in this manner. She lets out a scream. At the end of the aisle, I pause and make one more turn. You're such a sucker for attention, Amy. Congratulations, then. You understand. I left my own wedding after saying that. The following day was a wild one. Amy's missed calls and messages on my phone essentially blew up, as though we were exchanging hundreds of texts. She first gave off the impression that she didn't understand why I had gone, continued to say things as if they were jokes. How come you're being so dramatic? She then became irate and began writing lengthy texts complaining about how I had made her feel inferior. Isn't that ironic? And how she was shocked that I would spoil our wedding with a pointless joke. She even attempted to argue that I had no right to abandon her in that manner. This is where it gets interesting, though. Do you recall the group chat where they were betting being the complete genius that he is? Dan had taken screenshots of everything from one of the bridesmaids' phones prior to our departure. Every message they sent regarding organizing this practical joke, every wager they made. They were even talking about methods to sabotage me in communications from months ago. Amy tried to play the victim on social media and tell people that I left her at the altar during the wedding. Then, however, those screenshots began to circulate. It turns out that turning someone's wedding into a gambling game is not something that people like. It had enormous fallout. When they saw that others could view their texts, the bridesmaids who found it hilarious began to freak out. Because the screenshots were given to her prospective employer, Sarah, the maid of honor really lost her employment chance. I suppose they didn't want someone who found it amusing to make fun of others. The next day, Amy's parents gave me a call. Her mother was in tears as she said she didn't think Amy would do this. As it happens, they had told her not to be fanciful at the wedding. In fact, her father claimed he understood why I did what I did and apologized to me. Then came the financial part. Amy began requesting that I reimburse her for the expenses of the wedding. I had paid for nearly everything, so I laughed at it. My account, the catering, my card, and the location. She had been boasting to everyone about her lavish honeymoon. All reservations are made in my name. After making a single phone call to each location, everything was canceled. In fact, the venue management was really understanding. Claimed that although he had seen some bizarre wedding-related content, this was fresh. She was devastated by the cancellation of her honeymoon. She had already shared our incredible 2 weeks in Hawaii on social media. She had to tell everyone why she wasn't sharing photos from the beach. Her bridesmaids quickly began to distance themselves. When people realize they're going down with you, they quickly vanish, which is funny. Suddenly, even those who were aware of the entire situation didn't want to interact with her. Tom refused to return her calls or texts and utterly abandoned her. I suppose he no longer thought it was humorous. He was questioned about why he believed it was okay to disrupt someone's wedding. When her buddy Jen finally opened up to me, I could see how guilty she was. She was different from the others. She never found Amy's antics funny. I never participated in the group conversation. I never found it amusing to make someone seem bad. She said that she had been aware of the plot for weeks, but she felt compelled to keep quiet because of fear of Amy betraying her. She explained to me how she tried to caution Amy and pleaded with her to cancel, but Amy dismissed her, stating that it would be amusing to watch my response. Naturally, Tom had no trouble complying, most likely believed that made him appear cool or something. However, Jen detested every moment of it. She informed me that the night before the wedding, she didn't get much sleep. Knowing what was going to happen made me sick with worry. Additionally, she was unaware of the plan until she noticed me standing at the altar. She claimed that she froze when she wanted to shout to stop it before it happened. Her voice was low and remorseful, as she said, as if she believed that I would despise her for not doing more. However, I noticed something I hadn't seen in months for the first time. Real common sense. Someone who wasn't content to follow the herd. Someone who was concerned about people's feelings. And to be honest, that was more memorable to me than the entire wedding fiasco. Amy arrived at my flat a week after everything had happened, looking as though she hadn't slept for days. Her engagement ring is still on. She broke down in tears as she expressed her regret. She didn't intend for things to go this bad, how she still cherished me, and we could make this right. I gave her an envelope just now. An invitation to a fictitious wedding rehearsal was enclosed. Our wedding was scheduled to take place at the same location and time. The list of guests, everyone who witnessed her small trick, no name of the groom. We're even now just a note to that effect. Before she understood, she stood there and read it about 5 times. I just closed the door in her face as she glanced up. Do you recall all the phones that were recording throughout the wedding? Yes. Videos began to appear online. As a joke, people began referring to her as the bride who got abandoned. A meme was created from her own practical joke. Then additional screenshots would reveal how long they had planned this, how much money they bet, and all the nasty things they said about me in their group chat. Some of Amy's pals attempted to defend her online by stating that I should have handled the prank better. Every time someone gave me Amy's communications, they ended up seeing the screenshots as well. Amy attempted to contact me through common acquaintances, claiming she had learnt her lesson. She eventually ran out of individuals who would stand up for her. Amy never really recovered from the wedding that never happened, and it has been 6 months since then. She persisted in attempting to re-enter my life by messaging me to promise that if I gave her another opportunity, she would make things better, as if chances were some limitless resource that she hadn't already depleted with all of her foolish antics. However, I was finished. She also lost her bridesmaids, the same people who shared her laughter. The maid of honor, Sarah, even texted me a lengthy apology, saying that she felt terrible about what happened to Tom too late and that she should have told me. He began telling people that he was duped into the entire situation and barred Amy from everything. When I last heard from him, he had returned to his hometown and was now employed at his father's store. It turns out that the simple life wasn't all that horrible. Amy's parents continue to express regret whenever they see my family. In a Christmas card, her mother told me that she always remembers that day and wishes she had recognized the warning signals sooner. In fact, her father assisted me in selling the house Amy and I were planning to move into. The strange thing is that this entire chaos really produced something positive. I started going out for coffee with Jen sometimes just to chat, It turns out that Jen had been interested in me for some time, but she definitely kept it to herself since I was seeing Amy. Our time together increased. At first, nothing major. Just work lunch breaks. Perhaps going out to eat sometimes. Everything about her is different from Amy. Kind, yet quiet. Considers the sentiments of others. Never attempts to make fun of other people. 3 months following the nuptials. It wasn't. We formally began dating. She is adored by my parents. Even my sister, who detested Amy from the beginning, believes that Jen is the right person for me. Amy tried to create controversy online by claiming that Jen had planned everything and had stolen me from her after learning about us through common acquaintances. No one took her seriously. Any sympathy people might have had was kind of destroyed by the screenshots showing her plotting to embarrass me with her ex. Amy, by the way, is still working to repair her reputation. On Facebook, she posted a lengthy public apology detailing her growth and lessons gained. 2 days later, she attempted to approach Jen in the parking lot of my business. She had to be escorted out by security. Actually, I'm living a better life now. Received a promotion at work, this time a real one. It wasn't the one Amy ridiculed. Relocated to a new apartment in a more desirable area of town. I'm taking it easy with Jen. Last month, we took a vacation. Just a quick excursion to the beach. Nothing special, but it was good to be with someone who didn't feel the need to make a joke out of everything or share it all on social media. Oh, and the prenup folder is still with me. It was framed and given to me as a birthday present by my lawyer buddy Mike. I currently have it up in my home office. Jen finds it amusing. I escaped a gunshot according to my pal. I believe I escaped a whole firing squad. I can't believe I didn't see what was coming when I look at old photos of Amy and me. But when you wear rose-colored glasses, you know what they say. Red flags are just flags. The most peculiar aspect. In fact, I'm glad it happened. I may have been married to Amy if she hadn't shown her true nature that day. I might have put up with her jokes and pranks for years without realizing she was having an affair with Tom behind my back. I'm with someone who respects me instead. Someone who believes that love isn't about playing practical jokes, getting likes on social media, or making fun of your lover for amusement. That's where everyone ended up then. Amy lives with her parents and is still unmarried. Tom has returned to his hometown. The bridesmaids dispersed among the several states. And me, in fact, I'm content. It turns out that the finest things may occasionally come from the darkest day of your life. Story 3. While the city outside glistened with lights and soft melodies flowed through the icy air, it was 3 days before Christmas. One phone call changed my entire world. I had just shrugged out of my bulky winter coat and kicked off my hospital clogs as I entered my little Nashville apartment. A worn-out but sincere smile tugged at my mouth. My beautifully packed luggage was sitting in the corner of the room with a little forest green sweater neatly draped over it and a number of wrapped items placed by the door like promises. I knew the ingredients for the apple cinnamon bread pudding that my family liked, but I couldn't recall who cooked it. I had also purchased gifts for everyone. I had made a lot of effort to be sufficient and to accomplish things correctly. I didn't give it much attention when my phone rang and I saw Ethan's name flash on the screen. Perhaps he wanted me to plan rides like every other year or bring extra napkins. I could still hear the warmth in my voice. Ethan. Hello. This time, though, his voice was different. Lighter, nearly practiced. Hello. Listen up, this year Celeste will be attending Christmas. She is quite sensitive to energy and other things related to your work. Everything, even the hospital, might feel a little overwhelming. It could be best for her if you skipped this one, in my opinion. Nothing is personal. I stood there blinking languidly at my little Christmas tree while gazing at the lights. Nothing private. I spoke evenly, but my fists clenched over the phone. All right. Tasting like ash in my mouth, I murmured. My mom phoned an hour later. When she intended anything harsh to seem kind, her voice was soothing as it usually was, similar to covering barbed wire with silk. We just want to make things simple for everyone, honey. You are aware of Celeste's nature. It might be confusing if you come. To be honest, we might not even answer the door if you arrive. That was it. There is no more pretense. With sadness, no invitation was declined. No, they were evicted, encased in politeness. I was unwanted, not just not desired. I did not cry, nor did I yell. I never really belonged at the table. Therefore, I didn't beg for a place there. I just hung up. Carefully placing the phone on the counter, she gazed at the modest but optimistic stack of wrapped presents beside the entrance. Presents that the people I had devoted my life to attempting to love enough to be noticed would never open. Like someone packing up after an imaginary funeral, I went slowly and methodically. I opened my banking app and plugged in. Assistance for auto loans was stopped. Emergency maintenance funds were frozen, mortgages were topped up, and mortgages were canceled. I wasn't upset. I had just finished. I had persuaded myself for years that sacrifice was necessary for love. Being the trustworthy one was sufficient to gain a place at the family table. But as I stood there in the silence with the radiator humming and the aroma of cinnamon from the bread pudding I had made that morning still there, I came to terms with the reality. I never received a formal invitation to join. Until my existence became inconvenient, I was just tolerated. Outside, the first snow started to fall softly and steadily, silently covering the pavement. I felt a sudden calmness descend upon me as I observed it through the glass. Don't try again. I'm done reducing myself to fit into the few areas they provided. No more acting like you're someone you're not. I would not be the one pleading to be allowed in this Christmas standing at the door with my heart in my palm. I also came to the realization that I didn't have to be growing up for the first time in my life. The fact that some kids were brighter under the same roof while others just kept the lights on was something I used to consider typical. I was the first to be born. The test run. During several evenings of silent disappointment, my father would jest at a barbecue while giving Ethan the larger piece of cake. He was the golden kid, the creative, lovely miracle baby that they had dreamed for. And I was only the first. I recall Ethan using a black permanent marker to draw wild loops and swirls on the walls of the living room resembling rebellious vines on the beige paint. My parents laughed warmly and indulgently, describing it as expressive. 2 days later, I was too distracted, too serious, and irresponsible when I dropped a ball while setting the table. I recall their expressions at the time, how they treated me as though I were a skin-covered responsibility that I would never be able to live up to. Without breaking a beat, I received straight A's in school. While Ethan's participation ribbon sat brightly on the refrigerator for weeks, the report cards were silently put into drawers. I once sent a letter to my guidance counselor requesting assistance with my medical school application, and I put it on the kitchen counter in the ideal location, hoping someone would notice. I was waiting for someone to inquire as to why I required it. Nobody ever did. When the University of North Carolina School of Medicine accepted me. No wait list for the first round. I brought the letter home with me like a prize. "That's intense, honey," my mother replied with a small grin after skimming it. "You must use caution to avoid burning out." She stirred something that would never taste like approval before returning her attention to the burner. They also gave Ethan a reintegration celebration when he left college for the third time, pursuing his ambition of becoming a creative director. Cake with balloons. There is still a framed picture of him with a paintbrush hanging like a shrine in the corridor. For the kid who had not yet established himself, the house which had never honored my accomplishments virtually hummed with delight. One of my old sketchbooks was once discovered. Doodles from extended workdays. Under a stack of grocery store flyers, fragments of stories and sunsets were thrown into the recycle bin. They chuckled and claimed to believe it to be scrap paper when I questioned them about it. Perhaps it was for them. Perhaps I was too. Nevertheless, I persisted through residency medical school and many hours spent sitting next to patients. Nobody else desired to sit with them. In those deserted halls, I noticed a mirror, perhaps a quiet connection with those who had sacrificed their lives for others and been forgotten when they were no longer useful at home, which is why I selected geriatrics. I continued to play the same role. Keep quiet, trustworthy, invisible. When the insurance refused to pay for the leaky roof, I had to pay for it myself. I sent additional funds into Ethan's accounts once his freelancing work dwindled. I paid my mother's physical therapy co-pays. When Dad's truck required new brakes, I sent money. I loved them, so I did it. Or perhaps because I still thought that one had to earn love, something you purchased with sufficient sacrifice. They never thanked the public. They were not obliged to. They didn't express gratitude out loud in their language. Like oxygen, it was taken for granted like duty. As a result, each time I gave them another aspect of me, they accepted it with open arms and closed hearts without ever turning around. Family, I persuaded myself, meant and was recognized as vital. The framework supporting the hopes of all others. I didn't comprehend scaffolding shouldn't bleed for the structure until that night when I heard their nonchalant, courteous, and nasty phone calls. It provides assistance. Growing up just made the pattern more costly. It didn't alter it. Ethan stayed downtown in a loft that my parents helped pay for since he needed inspiration after their roof collapsed following a spring storm while I moved into my first apartment after residency, a one-bedroom flat with peeling paint and a broken furnace. When their medical expenditures mounted following Dad's operation, I was the one who discreetly sent the funds to the contractor. I submitted checks and worked out payment schedules, but they never even acknowledged them. I wasn't asked to. Nobody had to. Being helpful without being noticed made things simpler. I reminded myself that my worth wasn't being praised, and that my job was to catch the pieces that might otherwise break. However, because I was vital, my name was inscribed in invisible writing on every emergency. At midnight, Ethan's automobile battery died. Before the morning frost melted, I purchased a replacement. Physical treatment for my mother is past due. I made my own phone call to the clinic, paid the bills, and made travel arrangements. I paid for the ticket once more when Ethan hastily purchased new photographic gear and was unable to pay for his journey home for Thanksgiving. At the airport, he gave me a hug. Call me the world's greatest sister. And by the next week, the favor had been forgotten and tucked away in the never-ending list of demands they never had to make. Like a ghost in their life's machinery, I continued to put their demands before of myself. I'm gently removing my own fingerprints while fixing, smoothing, and hiding them. Maintaining my use would have been more difficult if I had been grateful. Perhaps they forgot I was the scaffolding again, so it was better. Since the house's secret beam had never collapsed before, they never considered giving it credit. At the hospital, sometimes late at night after working double shifts, sitting with a cup of tea by the window, I would ponder what it would be like to be seen. Nor as a need, nor as a backup plan, but just as Natalie, a person whose existence was sufficient, without needing to earn her the right to keep every family meal, every holiday, and every private issue. However, I've learned over the years to not dwell on wishes for too long. Golden Boy's desires did not pay off debts or change ingrained expectations. They were for children. So, like a sponge that was never meant to leak, I continued to move, to show up, to absorb every insult and every omission. Every year, when Christmas arrived, as if by magic, I cooked the apple cinnamon bread pudding that they all adored, carefully wrapped it in foil, and grinned when they said, "Oh, this is just like the one from last year." I made a discreet payment into Ethan's account when he was having trouble paying his rent in between assignments, and I didn't pay any attention to the fact that he only contacted later to boast about a new project. I was on the phone till 2 in the morning when my parents needed assistance with their taxes. Sitting undisturbed on the counter, I walked them through deductions on my own forms that they hardly comprehended. I believed that being in love entailed staying up late, taking every call, and resolving every issue before it became a hassle. I believed that the equation will ultimately balance if I simply put in enough effort and sacrificed enough. At some point, someone would see more in me than just an overstretched safety net. However, I came to terms with the awful reality that evening as I was standing in my tiny kitchen holding a still warm phone. They had never learned how, and I had never made them, so no matter how much I donated, they would never see me. I sat by myself in my poorly lit flat that night when the phone conversations stopped and the phony niceties faded into quiet. Like a memory that would not go away, the aroma of cinnamon was still there in the air. Outside, the city was enveloped in a respectful silence as the snow grew thicker, gentle, and unconcerned. Through the glass window, I saw it fall. The street lamps' lights are fading into halos. I grabbed my phone once again, but not to give them a call. Not to reason, not to fight, not to plead. The recognizable blue and white screen flickered to life with a soft beep as I launched my banking app. The $800 monthly mortgage top-up that had subtly prevented their home from going into default was canceled. Lost. Fund for emergency maintenance is locked. No more rescues on wet days. Assistance for auto loans was discontinued. Next winter, Ethan's new battery would be his own concern. At first, it felt robotic when I pressed buttons to turn off automated payments that had long been a part of my daily routine, such as paying my own rent or cleaning my teeth. But like a bird expanding its wings for the first time in a cage that was unintentionally left open, a curious lightness unfolded inside me with every cancellation and intentional act of removal. I took out a notepad and wrote down all of the silent debts I had taken on over the years, the airline tickets, the medical bills, the late-night wire transfers, the unceremony-free resolutions of the whispered emergencies. I gazed at the list until the writing became hazy, not from tears, but from a depth and age of anguish that had solidified into something quite pristine. I wasn't upset. not in the manner in which they would subsequently charge me. For the first time, I was just awake. They wouldn't immediately notice. The problem with being the unseen scaffolding is that nobody understands that you are supporting the entire dang ceiling until you are gone. Until the last notice came, the missing mortgage payment wouldn't hurt. Not until the pipes broke again in January will the forgotten rainy day savings matter. This time there wouldn't be a gentle landing sewn together by my hands, but Ethan's gigs would still flutter and fall as usual. I kept it a secret. No heated text messages, no great pronouncements, no postings on social media that are laced with ambiguous melancholy. The one family member who continued to send me birthday cards with handwritten comments, Aunt Lillian, was the only one I didn't inform. I just silently, fully withdrew. The holiday greeting I had partially written earlier that day was erased. The one wishing a happy and nice Christmas to everybody. I disconnected the tree. I returned the wrapped presents to the closet. Their happy paper seemed odd and gaudy in contrast to my newfound resolve. I refrained from crying. I didn't even think I had to. The space that has opened up inside of me had no room for sadness, just clarity. I came to the realization that love shouldn't seem like a continuous show for a non-applauding audience. A family shouldn't be a ledger where making sacrifice after sacrifice until nothing is left to offer is the price of joining. I had spent years thinking that I could win a spot that should have been mine without a doubt if I just put in enough effort, remained modest, and smiled broadly enough. However, love isn't love at all if it requires your quiet. Family isn't family if they simply accept your usefulness. It's a deal. Somewhere across town, my family departed and organized a Christmas celebration when I was no longer willing to pay into the snow that had grown outside and was shrouding the entire world in a new, uncaring silence. I wasn't asked. They thought that without me, Christmas would be lighter. I gave it to them. I allowed them to use the carefully crafted illusion as the foundation for their celebration. The hefty one, the one where I was the issue. The annoying reminder that beauty isn't always pure. I didn't show up for the first time in my life. By doing this, I was able to recover something that I had not even recognized I had lost. The dawn of Christmas was gloomy and gentle. There was a thick quiet over the outer world that seemed to sink into my bones. I had a mug of tea in my hands while I sat by the window. From the steam came the subtle aroma of cinnamon and apple, a bittersweet, somehow empty feeling. In the corner, the presents I had wrapped with such care remained unopened. Careful ribbons and bright paper teased me with their misguided optimism. The tree wasn't lit by me. The Christmas playlist, which typically played softly in the background, was not activated. I made no phone calls. I just sat there, covered in a blanket that still had a little scent of fabric softener and rosemary, looking out at a world that for once mirrored how I felt on the inside, silent, chilly, and painfully motionless. Nevertheless, there was no sorrow. No sobs lurking under the surface crying at me. All that was present was an odd silence, almost hallowed, the sort that leaves the air so well cleaned after a storm. It wasn't until it was gone that I understood how much noise I had been carrying. Time passed slowly throughout the day. Without the typical barrage of calls and tumultuous background noise from my parents' living room, noon arrived and went. No group shots, no Ethan sharing joyous selfies with Celeste, the family's new favorite. I didn't receive any last-minute texts requesting Venmo money since the ham turned out to be more costly than they had anticipated. Nothing but quiet. My phone didn't beep once, twice, and then 3 times in quick succession until the sun had sunk low below the hills, leaving the sky a deep violet hue. I initially thought it was a group discussion that I had neglected to silence, but then a message appeared. Aunt Lillian, are you able to respond? You've already caused enough harm. The words burned like a flaming indictment into my retinas, making my stomach plummet. Injury. What harm? I couldn't really comprehend it because I hadn't been there before. As soon as Lillian's name appeared on the screen, my phone rang once again. With a scratchy voice from lack of usage, I replied, "What took place?" I inquired. She said softly, like a person walking up to a wounded animal cautious. She said, "They're saying you ruined Christmas. However, you weren't even present." Stunted into stillness, I blinked. I wasn't even invited, so how could I have wrecked it? In what way might being present be more disruptive than being absent? After a pause, Aunt Lillian resumed assembling the narrative in halting, fragmented sentences. Celeste had apparently wandered around the house after dinner, sipping a glass of wine while looking at the old family pictures that are arranged on the mantel. She had recognized me when she saw a faded photo of me from a birthday celebration years ago, grinning clumsily in a too large sweater. "Dr. Natalie Hartman is that person?" Over the low hum of post-dinner chatter, she had spoken out loud. "Aunt Lillian says she saved my grandmother's life." Suddenly, there was silence in the room. Fawkes died in the middle of his breath, frozen halfway to his mouth's laughter. The next few moments were a blur, half-true mutterings, uncomfortable looks, and a tension that could choke you. Celeste inquired as to whether I was the sister they frequently discussed, and based on her response, she discreetly gathered her belongings. I give my parents a firm thank you and walk out without saying anything more. The fallout had already started when Lillian called me. Celeste shared something on the internet that was genuine and unvarnished, and it began to reverberate through the tenuous web of relationships my family had built over the years around Ethan's nascent artistic career. I was not yet fully informed. I didn't have to. It was exactly what I could imagine. Jokes about me being too intense were whispered, the careless brutality masquerading as worry. The way they turned my whole life into a warning about loneliness and ambition. For once, someone else had been listening, even though it wasn't new. Someone who had actually seen me and wasn't brought up to think that brutality was the only way families loved me. Through the vivid recollection of an instance in which compassion had been more important than appearance, rather than through the warped prism of bitterness and shame. Sitting in the growing silence that night, I came to what may have been the most profound realization of my life. Sometimes the most profound revenge isn't slamming doors or shouting truths no one wants to hear. Sometimes it's simply stepping away and letting the truth echo in the silence you leave behind. The day after Christmas, the desperation started leaking through the cracks. It began with an email subject line. "Let's reset things." As if years of erasure and dismissal could be wiped clean with a clever title. It was signed not just by my mother or father individually, but by both of them and Ethan too. As if presenting a united front would somehow erase the fracture they had spent decades carving. I opened it with the clinical detachment I reserved for the worst patient notes. The ones who knew were a disaster before you even read them. They made no apologies. Not at all. There were words about heightened emotions, about misunderstandings, about how much they valued family in that careful Polish language that says everything and means nothing. Buried halfway down the fourth paragraph was the real reason for the sudden olive branch. They wanted me to reach out to Celeste to clarify things, to smooth it over, to safeguard Ethan's reputation in the art circles she was associated to in New York. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. It was about the repercussions, the chaos. I hadn't even made the mirrors shattering under the weight of their own reflection. They hadn't suddenly realized they had abused me. They had just concluded the cost of such abuse had climbed higher than they were prepared to pay. I didn't respond. My phone buzzed once more that evening. This time, A came from the hospital administrator, someone I had met only once at a charity dinner. A man with nice eyes and a solid handshake. He made a clumsy apology, said that my father had called, voiced worries about my mental stability, and hinted that I could be having difficulties and should use some time off. Cold wrath. The type that crystallizes sharp and cutting but doesn't erupt made my face flush. Once joking that I was too serious for my own good, my father was now using my seriousness as a weapon against me. He felt it would terrify me into cooperation, not because he believed it. The damage was evident, but fortunately, the administrator saw through it. They had no intention of repairing anything. They were attempting to control me in the only way they knew how, by discrediting me, by bringing back my grin when it didn't work. The following wave arrived in the form of well-crafted half-truths and group texts to extended relatives portraying me as unstable, alone, and currently battling with certain issues. Nothing about not being invited to Christmas. The years of quiet sacrifice are not mentioned. Just a low-key campaign of rumors meant to undermine confidence before I had a chance to speak. I received a message from a relative I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, with a happy emoji at the end, offering a yoga getaway certificate in case you're feeling stressed. The word was not overwhelmed. Every little deception and every effort at manipulation disguised in words of compassion simply served to reinforce what I had already started to realize. I wasn't the reason they were arguing. They were battling for the self-image they had created for themselves. The family who loved and admired Ethan for his intelligence. Their appearances were maintained at all costs, and I was the obedient, reserved sister who never caused a stir. However, I had finished preserving them. Outside my window, I observed the snow still falling. Behind me, every flake erases a new remnant of the road. And for the first time, I didn't feel compelled to defend my version of events or offer an explanation. I was aware of the reality. And perhaps, just possibly, that was sufficient in the end. Emails and rumors weren't the end of it. With those who think they are entitled to your quiet, it never works. At my door, the following step was subtly wrapped in the comforting warmth of my mother's voice. The Sunday afternoon was calm, one of those winter days when the chill appears to be pressing like a live thing on the windows. I heard a faint, almost hesitant knock while I was organizing patient notes at my desk, a mug of lukewarm tea neglected next to me. At first, I didn't move. The only sound I heard was my own heartbeat, steady and composed. Then I got up, sauntered to the entrance, and peered through the crowd. My father, mother, and Ethan were standing clumsily on the front step, coats bundled up and fake grins, a desperate depiction of a family. I was slow to open the door. I was not afraid, just a kind of disinterested melancholy. It's the same feeling you get when you finally see that the rescue ship you've been hoping for is only a mirage. I slightly opened the door to allow the cold to enter, but not enough to let them in. My mom was the first to speak. Her tone was deliberately adjusted to sound soft. She clutched her handbag like a lifeline and whispered, "We just want to talk." I remained still. I didn't nod. I ultimately realized they weren't there for me, so I didn't become any softer. They were there for the part of me that still believed that love might be exchanged for the girl who would shrink herself into the confined places they permitted. This was no longer the residence of the girl. Between us, there was a thick, brittle quiet. I noticed my father's eyes flash with frustration. Ethan's weight shifting from foot to foot as if he wished to go somewhere else. They didn't feel comfortable. Excellent. I finally spoke the one word I needed to say after a long pause. No. No reopening of wounds, no negotiating, no explanations. They had never made an effort to recover. My mom's face fell flat. Part offense, part perplexity. As though she was still in shock that the sturdy scaffolding she had relied upon for so long had just moved aside. I quietly shut the door, locking it on the other side without slamming it or creating a scene. I didn't pay attention when I heard their muffled voices rising first in pleading, then in frustration. The silence fell across the room like a balm as I made my way back to my desk, sat down, and put my hands around my now cold tea. Beside my computer was Celeste's framed letter. At the corners where she had pressed too hard while writing the ink was still a little smudged. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the pressure of expectations on my chest when I looked at it. I reflected on the years I had spent trying to gain acceptance in a family that only ever evaluated me based on how I didn't fit their ideal of themselves. I reflected on all the times I had swallowed my own suffering to ease their discomfort. Each time, in order to spare them from feeling the icy water below, I had constructed a bridge out of my own brokenness, and I considered the reality, the one from which I had last ceased to flee. I wasn't made to be practical. I wasn't made to be a sponge for their failures or a mirror for their pride. I was something different, and perhaps just possibly that was sufficient in the end. They did not immediately go. I could hear the faint scrape of shoes on the doorstep, the quiet hum of rushed speech, and the hint of desperation in their voices. Lighter and seemingly remorseful, my mother knocked again. "Please, Natalie, all we want to do is chat." However, I remained sat at my desk. Celeste's framed letter, a silent bulwark in the escalating tempest. I sipped my cold tea and enjoyed its bitter flavor. I waited till the knocking subsided into quiet. I realized for the first time that it wasn't always necessary to reopen the door in order to forgive. Sometimes that meant not doing it. You eventually erected a wall of self-respect rather than rage, even if it meant remaining still while the individuals who had wronged you wore themselves out against the wall. Minutes went by, perhaps more time. After a while, I heard footsteps move away, the gentle clatter of automobile doors shutting, the engine's deep roar as it started. They had vanished. Denied, but not beaten. I gently got up and moved to the window, lowering the curtain just enough to catch a glimpse of their car's rear as it vanished down the snow-covered street. I didn't feel the need to chase after them. I don't feel the need to call them back. Rather, a profound, resonating calmness settled into my bones, the sort of tranquility that only arises when you quit pleading for a place at a table that was never intended for you. I turned away from the window and walked through my tiny, silent apartment with a steadiness I didn't realize I had. The lighted Christmas tree in the corner was no longer dejected. The unopened presents were arranged in a tidy stack not as a sign of rejection, but rather as proof that I had made an effort and loved as best I could, that I was successful. They just hadn't realized what they were getting. The steam rose in leisurely spirals as I poured myself another cup of tea, this time stronger. I reseated myself at my desk and pulled the blanket tightly about my shoulders. The edge of the light fell on Celeste's letter. The penmanship is confident and steady. You had an impact. She had written. You persisted. You gave her a sense of importance. I delicately touched the frame with my fingertips, enjoying the coolness of the glass and the faint ridges in the wood. Tangible reminders that you are valuable even if those closest to you don't agree. Someone else will. Someone sincere. Someone listening. I reflected on all the years I had spent attempting to fit into a mold that was never intended for me, shrinking myself into ever tinier forms. I reflected on how I had confused patience with love, the weariness and the never-ending pursuit of attachment. And I reflected about when I had shut the door, with finality, not with anger or resentment. It wasn't mean. Clarity was the key. It wasn't because they liked me that they had come. They needed me, which is why they had come. I needed to fill in the gaps with the calm, obedient self. They wouldn't admit it. However, that girl had left. She was replaced by a lady who saw that it is not your responsibility to complete someone regardless of how much you love them. You have no need to sacrifice yourself for their comfort. Staying damaged so others may feel whole is not your fate. As I sat there, the snow kept falling outside, covering the entire landscape in pristine white, and I knew I was free, perhaps for the first time. The days were as leisurely and oddly gentle as the first. After a prolonged period of strain, deep breaths are eventually released. I returned to my job. I went around the medical facility. I sat with patients whose families continued to visit, and with patients whose families had ceased coming for a while. I paid attention. I remained. I completed the important work. No one ever hosted a celebration honoring the work. A little gift showed up at my door one day. No address for return, just the delicate slanted calligraphy of my name. I carefully opened it, removing the brown wrapper to find a letter nestled inside heavy stationery in the color ivory. The corners of the ink were a little smeared, a personal touch in a world that was too polished most of the time. Celeste sent it. She wrote of her grandma who continued to walk to the farmer's market every Saturday morning and practice yoga twice a week. When the world had quietly begun to give up on an elderly woman with failing kidneys and a waning spirit years ago, she wrote about a doctor who sat by her bedside long after visiting hours ended, and who treated her not as a burden, but as a person who was still capable of joy and deserving of dignity. Celeste wrote, "You didn't just save her life. It was you that reminded her that she was alive." I traced the words with my fingers as though I were attempting to carve them into my flesh while I read the letter twice and then a third time. That evening, I framed it and hung it over my desk so it would be illuminated by the morning light. A tiny, silent reminder of the reality I had nearly forgotten. I wasn't invisible. I wasn't hefty. I wasn't too much. I was just who I was meant to be. And my value was never determined by those who were unable to perceive that. I didn't feel the need to defend my limits or give an explanation for myself for the first time in as long as I could remember. To express regret for the way my life has turned out. I had no acquaintances. A ticket to enter my life. Not even the people who used to get the finest and first seats. Another email, less formal, more urgent and more revealing, came in a few weeks later. The family had been pleading with me for years to smooth out, shrink, and quiet myself for their comfort, and this was their last effort. It started with the standard phrases. "You are missed. We had no intention of hurting you." Can we begin again? Buried close at the end, like a splinter they were unable to conceal. That was the true appeal. Kindly request that Celeste remove her post. Ethan is having trouble finding a job. His future is now being impacted. Not a repentance or a reckoning. Just another deal. They thought I owed them another loan. I didn't answer. Not all bridges are intended for reconstruction. There are some doors that are better left closed. Respect for the person you've worked so hard to become, not rage. That evening, as I sat at my desk organizing patient notes, the sun sank below my window, illuminating the letter from Celeste with long golden striations. I closed my eyes, reclined in my chair, and felt whole for the first time in years. I stopped requesting permission to believe it myself, not because someone else finally told me I mattered. Therefore, to everyone who has ever experienced being made to feel invisible by those who are meant to see you first. To everyone who has received too many, too important, or too inconvenient calls. Let me explain. They'll never say. You don't have too much. You have never had to compromise who you are in order to fit into someone else's flawed narrative, and you are not a burden. Compose your own. And if you felt something after reading this narrative, know this: if you've ever sat in the silence after being excluded and felt more liberated than before, not showing up at all is sometimes the most effective thing you can do. Story 4. Emily Hartwell watched the city slowly turn to its fall hues from the windows of a high-rise in Boston. She sighed contentedly as she stood at the window of her roomy office. The CEO herself had expressed her admiration for the significant project her team had been working on, which had finally begun. "Emily, you've done a fantastic job. Next year, I'll put your name on the list for a promotion." As a core manager at Nova Technologies, Emily's ability and devotion were praised by CEO Ann Taylor. After 10 years of hard work, Emily felt that her efforts were finally paying off. She had a steady salary and was seen as successful by her colleagues. Recalling the Thanksgiving holiday that would start tomorrow, she said, "Thank you." Her yearly visit to her family's house was about to begin. She phoned her mother and went back to her workstation to check her last few emails. "I'm going out shortly, Mom. This year, I'll be bringing my own cranberry sauce." Through the receiver came Martha's kind voice. "Oh, Emily, you have the finest cranberry sauce. Be careful when driving. Your arrival is anticipated by Jessica and the kids. Emily grinned. Since her father, John, had died unexpectedly 3 years ago from a heart attack, family ties appeared to have become even more solid, and her mother's voice had a reassuring tone. Emily left the workplace and went to her apartment to pack her bags and the prepared cranberry sauce into the car. Without traffic, the travel from Boston to her family's suburban Newton home took roughly 40 minutes. Emily thought about what had happened since she graduated from college while she listened to the radio in the vehicle. She had always provided for her family's needs, including paying for her mother's colon cancer treatment, her father's burial, her sister Jessica's college tuition, the down payment on the house, and Jessica's wedding. That's more than $800,000. For most people, that would have been a significant sum, but Emily thought it had been a selfless gesture. As she stopped in front of the family house, she told herself that it was for the family, of course. When the door opened, Jessica and Martha hurried out grinning. "We've been waiting, Emily." Martha gave her daughter a firm embrace. The three of them hugged at the door as big sister Jessica joined in. "Mom, I'm very glad to see you, Jessie." Sincerely, Emily thought. She walked into the living room to see the big TV her mother had been dreaming about, along with brand new leather couches. Emily had given them to her mother as a birthday gift last month. "Mom, that looks beautiful." Emily grinned. With tears in her eyes, Martha answered, "Thank you very much. I'm not sure what would have happened to us if it weren't for you." Jessica escorted her sister to the kitchen by taking her arm. "Having you is such a blessing, sis. Mike's career has stabilized, and we were able to begin the children's education insurance." Emily grinned as she watched Jessica's kids, 3-year-old Noah and 5-year-old Emma, play in the living room corner. They rushed over to Emily as soon as they realized they weren't. "Are you present, Emma?" "It's not courteous," Jessica reprimanded. "It's all right," Emily chuckled. "I do, of course, but that's for the surprise tomorrow." Emily played with the kids and then went to the kitchen to help make the turkey stuffing for supper. Martha gave her daughter's face a gentle pat. "I take it you've lost weight. You're exerting too much effort. Give yourself a bit more thought." "I'm all right." "Mom, my work is rewarding and I adore it," Emily replied. "No boyfriend yet?" her mom inquired. Emily gave a headshake. "Right now, I'm concentrating on my career." Furthermore, she paused her speech. In actuality, she had little time or money to devote to romantic relationships because she was spending most of it on her family. "Don't worry about us too much." Martha looked concerned as she grasped her daughter's hand. "I also want you to be happy." "I'm glad, Mom," Emily smiled in response. "I'm happy when my family is well and healthy." Mike, Jessica's husband, and Emily had a heated discussion about his business over dinner. Mike was employed at a nearby construction business, but his pay was erratic due to changes in the economy. Nevertheless, he thanked Emily for things. "The children's future would have been unknown without you. Many thanks." "That's the purpose of family," Emily said with a smile as she held up her wine glass. Emily used her smartphone to check her savings account balance later that evening while she was alone herself in the guest room. She had no regrets, even though she was aware that it was far less than the typical savings for her age group. She recalled what her father had said as she gazed out the window at the starry sky. "Emily family is everything. Keep it in mind." "Dad, I understand." Emily spoke to the stars in a whisper. "This family will be all right as long as I'm here." For the first time in a long time, she would spend time with her family tonight. Snow had started to fall outside the window as Emily woke up. There was something hallowed about the first snowfall on Thanksgiving morning in the peaceful Boston suburbs. She went downstairs to put on her bathrobe after getting out of bed. Aromas and sounds of cooking were already permeating the air. Martha was in the kitchen getting the turkey ready. Emily's mother turned, looking a little anxious as Emily walked in. "Greetings, ma'am. Do you need assistance?" "Oh, Emily, you're awake." After cleaning her hands, Martha started to pour coffee. "Actually, I wanted to discuss something with you." Emily was momentarily tight from experience at the tone of her voice. "There's something to discuss regarding her mother." usually referred to money problems. She took the coffee cup and sat at the counter. Mom, what is it? Taking a deep breath, Martha gave her daughter a stern look. Ruth, it's about the house. Emily sighed to herself. The roof. What took place the hurricane last month wrecked it. After inspecting it, a contractor concluded that a full repair was necessary. Martha seemed distressed. It won't be fully covered by the insurance. What will the price be? Emily asked, trying to look composed. $70,000. Martha's voice grew quieter. The insurance, however, will only cover $30,000. That's the remaining $40,000. She stopped talking. Emily heard the voice in her head once more. A new refrigerator cost $5,000 last month, $2,000 for yard upkeep the previous month. Even though the costs appeared to go on forever, her face didn't alter. I get it. Next week I'll send the money. Martha's expression lightened. Really? You really are a daughter of angels. She grasped Emily's two hands. I'm not sure what I would do without you. That is the purpose of family. Emily interrupted her mother. Grandpa's home has to be maintained. This house belonged to the Hartwell family, who had owned the mansion for 3 generations. Emily also had recollections of the ancient house her grandpa had constructed. She understood the logic. But in her heart, she was wondering why she was constantly required to pay. Gradually. Emily assisted in preparing the Thanksgiving feast in the morning, helping to make the green bean casserole, mashed potatoes, stuffing, and turkey. As she prepared these traditional delicacies, she shared lovely times with her family. She was attempting to work out her feelings even after pledging to cover the cost of the roof repair. Do you have a moment? Sis, Jessica phoned Emily in the living room after lunch. Jessica pulled out a glossy brochure while the sisters were alone themselves. Take a look at this. She handed the brochure to Emily with excitement. What do you think? Isn't it lovely? Emily took the brochure. It was a catalog for the latest model BMW X5. It's a nice car, Emily said carefully. Do you want to buy it? Yes. Jessica's eyes sparkled. I need a safe car for the children. But Mike's salary makes it difficult, right? Emily anticipated her sister's words. Tears welled up in Jessica's eyes. Mike is trying his best, but the construction industry hasn't recovered yet. She took her sister's hand. If I had about $45,000 with the trade in value. For a moment, Emily felt an impulse to refuse. But seeing her sister's teary eyes and hearing her niece and nephew's laughter from the next room, she couldn't find the words to decline. I'll pay it back in installments. Jessica quickly added a little each month. All right, Emily answered quietly. But this is the last time. Of course. Jessica jumped with joy and hugged her sister tightly. You're the best sister in the world. That evening, Emily was organizing her finances in her room. The laptop screen displayed records of her expenditures on her family over the past 5 years. While major medical expenses and funeral costs were unavoidable, normal living costs like roof repairs and car purchases should have been covered by each family member's income. Especially in Jessica's case, her husband Mike's income was not particularly low, even considering the instability of the construction industry. An annual income of $60,000 was average for this area. So why were they always short of money? Emily looked at her social media. Jessica's posts showed photos of relaxing time at a spa last month, dinner dates with Mike at expensive restaurants, and pictures of her happily holding brand name bags. She said she'd pay back a little each month. Emily remembered past promises, college tuition, wedding expenses. None had ever been repaid. I'm overthinking, she told herself. That's what family is for. We help each other. However, her colleague Rebecca's words came to mind. Emily, you're too nice. Being family doesn't mean you should be exploited. At dinner time, Emily sat down with her usual smile. The family conversation was pleasant and warm. Martha showed off her new jewelry, and Jessica talked about events at the children's school. Emily, thanks to you, we are truly blessed. Martha raised her wine glass. Having a daughter like you makes me the happiest mother in the world. We can live because of Emily. Jessica joined in. I can't imagine what life would be without you, sis. Listening to the words of gratitude from her family, Emily felt conflicted. Being thanked turned her doubts into guilt. Am I a terrible person for doubting my family? That night alone, Emily checked her savings balance and was shocked. Her savings at age 35 were far below the average for her age group. Her 401k for retirement had only minimal contributions. At this rate, I'll have to work forever, she muttered, calculating her future outside the window. Snow continued to fall silently. Emily lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Is my life only for my family? The question arose in her heart. Supporting blood family is natural. She tried to tell herself, but a sense of discomfort grew stronger in her heart. Her life had always been family first. Her own desires were postponed. She had no room to deepen romantic relationships, and she constantly saved money while her colleagues enjoyed vacations. All of it was to support her family. Is this love, or... Emily swallowed her words. To call it exploitation was too harsh. A doubt. On the eve of Thanksgiving. Emily fell asleep, battling complex emotions. The next morning, Emily was awake from early morning. Outside the window, snow had accumulated and the fresh morning light illuminated the snow surface. She lay in bed organizing the day's schedule. In her mind, put the turkey in at noon. Prepare the side dishes. She recalled the cooking plan she had made with her mother last night. Emily looked at the clock. 7:30 a.m. Originally, she had a brunch appointment with her colleague Diane. Since Diane also had no family, they had a tradition of meeting just for Thanksgiving morning. However, because Martha had said it would help if you could come around noon tomorrow. Since we have a lot of cooking, Emily had canceled her brunch with Diane. After showering, Emily checked her mobile phone. There was a message from Diane. It's unfortunate, but it can't be helped. Let's definitely meet next year. Happy Thanksgiving. Emily smiled and replied, then looked out the window. The snow had stopped and the sun was showing its face. She suddenly had an idea. If I help with the cooking preparations, Mom might be happy. She decided to change her plans and head to the family home early. She thought about contacting Martha but decided to make it a surprise and refrained from calling. At 9:15 a.m., Emily parked in front of the family home. Although she arrived an hour earlier than planned, the kitchen should already be bustling. She took an apron and her special dessert wine from the trunk and walked quietly toward the house. She paused for a moment at the entrance. The old house, covered in snow, stood peacefully in the morning light. Memories of childhood flooded her mind. Fishing with her father, cooking with her mother, playing with her sister, all precious memories. Emily quietly opened the door with her key. The hallway was quiet and warm air enveloped her. Voices and aromas drifted from the kitchen. She was about to say good morning as she proceeded down the hallway, but stopped when she heard her mother and sister's conversation. That won't do, Jessica Martha's voice said. You need to think more carefully. I know, Mom. Jessica's voice contained laughter. But Emily will take care of it somehow. Like always. Emily stopped. The two were talking about her standing at the corner of the hallway. She listened to the conversation. I wonder how much we can get out of Emily, Jessica said. I got the new car, but next I'm thinking of asking for a kitchen renovation. It's unnatural to ask for so much in succession, Martha replied. Wait a bit. Emily is generous, but she's not stupid. Emily's heart began to race. This conversation didn't sound like a joke she had against the wall and continued listening. How should I bring it up? Jessica's voice continued. Maybe we need a safe kitchen for the children. Or a mic. Salary just isn't enough. Her mother's laughter followed. She's weak to the word of family. If you say for the family, she'll give anything. Emily's hands began to tremble. She gripped the dessert wine bottle tightly and held her breath. Actually, Mike already got promoted. Jessica's voice grew quieter. His annual salary is now $85,000. But don't tell Emily. Smart girl. Martha's voice held pride. We deserve a little luxury since Emily is so generous with her money. We might as well take advantage of it. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. Was this a bad dream? She leaned against the wall as if sleepwalking. Mom, I'm thinking. Jessica's voice was heard again. She still doesn't realize she's our breadwinner. That's right, Martha added with a laugh. Even though she bought the house and the car, she still thinks she's being helpful. Emily almost let out a small sound, but desperately suppressed it. Her hands were shaking, and she felt her knees weakening. We were really lucky, Martha's voice continued. Who would have thought she'd become so successful? Thanks to her, we can live comfortably. Yes, Jessica agreed. Imagine getting $40,000 when there's no need for roof repairs. The roof, Emily gasped. Had the roof repair she promised to pay for yesterday been a lie? With that $40,000, we can realize our Bahamas trip, Martha said. Just tell Emily it's for a roof repairs and she'll be fine. She never comes to check. Jessica said she always sends the money, just as we say in Emily's mind. The world began to spin. I had all her love and trust been built on deception. The trembling in her hands spread throughout her body, and she pressed her back against the wall. How much have we squeezed out of her so far? Jessica asked. At least $1 million. I would think, Martha answered. Half of her salary is ours. The laughter of the two echoed in the kitchen. Emily felt a pain as if her heart was shattering into pieces. But don't you sometimes feel guilty? Jessica's voice contained a hint of hesitation. What are you saying? Martha's voice turned cold. She's a daughter of the Hartwell family. Supporting family is only natural. Besides, she gladly gives money. Just say for the family and she'll give it any time. True, Jessica immediately agreed. Thanks to Emily, we can live such a wonderful life. Emily quietly backed away. Her heart had turned as cold as ice with trembling hands. She placed the dessert wine bottle on the hallway table and reached for the doorknob. Tears streamed down her cheeks in the brightness outside. Emily squinted for a moment. She walked to her car, opened the door, and collapsed into the seat. Then, without starting the engine, she just pressed her head against the steering wheel. 10 years. It was all a lie, she whispered. Memories from childhood flowed like a revolving lantern. Her father's death, her mother's illness, her sister's college. Was it all planned? She took a deep breath, trying to organize her scattered thoughts. Stay calm, stay calm. She took out her smartphone and sent a short message to Martha. Something urgent came up and I won't be able to come today. I'm sorry. After pressing the send button, she put her phone on silent mode. Emily started the engine and began to move the car slowly. She looked at the family home in the rearview mirror. The house that had been a symbol of love and trust now looked like a monument to deception. I won't be deceived again, she resolved as she drove. Anger and sadness intertwined in Emily's heart. However, there was also a strange sense of liberation. All the years of doubt and discomfort had now found their answer. What should I do? Back at her apartment, Emily first called her lawyer. James Morrison was an old friend of her father and had handled the family's legal matters for many years. James, I need to consult with you urgently. Her voice trembled but was filled with determination. Of course. Emily, what happened? It's about family. She took a deep breath. I need to act immediately to protect my assets. After hanging up, Emily opened her laptop and began to check all transaction records from the past 10 years. Bank statements, house deeds, car loans, everything needed to be thoroughly investigated. It's over, she firmed her resolve. I'm no longer the family bank. Outside the window. Snow began to fall again. Emily stared at her reflection in the window. There were no tears in her eyes, replaced by a cold light of determination. The morning after Thanksgiving, Martha stood by the window, gazing at the snow-covered garden. Emily's sudden cancellation yesterday had been unexpected, but she didn't seem overly concerned. She'll call soon anyway, she told Jessica. She always prioritizes us. Jessica was sitting on the sofa looking at something on her new tablet. Yes, but it was a bit strange. She hasn't replied to this morning's text either. You're worrying too much. Martha shrugged. Emily is busy. Besides, Martha's words were interrupted by the sudden ringing of the doorbell. The clock showed 10 a.m. Who could that be? Martha tilted her head. Emily, but she has a key. Jessica shrugged, and Martha headed for the door. When she opened the front door, 3 men in black suits were standing there. One was in his mid-40s with a strict expression, another in his 30s, holding a document case, and the third was somewhat older with a quiet impression. Are you Mrs. Martha Hartwell? The central man asked. Yes, I am. Martha began to feel anxious. And you are? The man offered his business card. James Morrison, representative attorney of Hartwell Law Firm. He pointed to the man next to him. This is David Clark, representative of First Bank, and introduced the third person, and Robert Taylor, representative of Premium Auto Finance. Martha accepted the business card in confusion. What brings you here? We are here on behalf of Miss Emily Hartwell. Morrison answered calmly. May we come in to talk? Martha silently invited them in. Jessica stood up from the sofa and stood next to her mother with a tense expression. What happened? Did something happen to Emily? Jessica asked anxiously. Miss Emily is fine, Morrison answered. Today, we have brought some legal documents. He opened his briefcase and took out a stack of papers. These are legal documents regarding the return of property. Return of property, Martha said with a confused expression. What does that mean? Mr. Clark stepped forward. To put it simply, the mortgage on this house has actually been paid in full by Miss Emily Hartwell, and we will be changing the name on the deed. What the blood drained from Martha's face. Mr. Taylor continued. Similarly, the loan for Jessica Williams' car, the BMW X5, is in Miss Emily's name. Jessica collapsed into a chair. This must be some mistake. It is not a mistake, Morrison said calmly. Emily initiated all legal procedures yesterday. Here is a detailed record of all amounts she has given to you. The document he spread out clearly recorded all payment histories for the past 10 years. The mortgage, Martha's medical expenses, Jessica's college tuition vehicle purchase costs, and the latest transfer labeled roof repair. All were recorded with dates and amounts. But Martha was at a loss for words. Emily loves family, for us. Financial exploitation can be a criminal offense even among family members, Mrs. Hartwell Morrison said firmly. Miss Emily has generously chosen not to press criminal charges, but she will proceed with civil recovery. Jessica looked up. Tears were floating in her eyes. Why this? You probably know why, Morrison answered coldly, according to what I heard from Emily. Yesterday's conversation was decisive. Martha and Jessica looked at each other and they realized the terrible truth. Emily had come earlier than scheduled and had heard their conversation. This is just a misunderstanding, Martha said weakly. Whatever the details, legal proceedings have already begun. Mr. Clark said he pointed to the documents from today. The deed to this house reverts to Miss Emily Hartwell. Please vacate within 30 days. 30 days, Martha cried. But this is my house. No, it isn't, Morrison said calmly. On paper, it belongs to Miss Emily. She paid the mortgage and she has borne the maintenance costs. Mr. Taylor added the same applies to the car. We will come to collect it tomorrow. Where are we supposed to go? Jessica said, crying. That is not our concern, Morrison answered matter-of-factly. Miss Emily advises you to look for housing that matches your actual income. Income. Martha was confused. Yes, with Michael Williams' annual income of $85,000 plus your pension. A decent life should be possible, Morrison said calmly. Although a trip to the Bahamas might be difficult. Jessica's face turned pale. Even Mike's promotion had been discovered. Let me see, Emily, Martha said desperately. If we talk, she'll understand. Miss Emily does not wish for direct contact for the time being, Morrison said firmly. All communication should go through me. The three men calmly spread out the remaining documents: eviction notice, car recovery authorization, bank account, change forms, all with Emily's signature. "Please sign these documents." Morrison offered a pen Martha and Jessica as if in a nightmare. Sign the documents with trembling hands. The situation they had once manipulated had completely reversed. "That completes it." Morrison returned the documents to his briefcase. "We will contact you later regarding the details of the eviction. If you have any questions, please contact my office." After the three men left, Martha and Jessica sat stunned in the living room outside the window. Snow had begun to fall again. "How did it come to this?" Martha said in a trembling voice. Jessica didn't answer. Her phone rang. It was from Mike. "What's wrong?" She answered the phone. Mike's confused voice could be heard from the other end. "I got a call from the bank at the office. They say the car loan is in default." "What's happening?" Jessica hung up. She finally understood. Years of exploitation had come to an end. Now they would have to live within their own incomes. "Emily will still give us money, won't she?" she weakly asked her mother. "After all, we're family." Martha was staring out the window. "It's over." "Jessica." Her voice was hollow. "What we did was unforgivable." A year later, from the window of a high-rise apartment in Boston, a beautiful evening view of the city spread out. Emily stood by the window gazing at the autumn leaves in a distant park. Her life had changed dramatically since that Thanksgiving day. The spacious living room of the luxury apartment was furnished with pieces she had chosen for herself. No longer needing to save for others, she felt the joy of living for herself for the first time. Cheerful voices could be heard from the kitchen. Her colleague and close friend Sarah was preparing Thanksgiving dinner. "Emily, can I open the wine?" Sarah called out. "Of course." Emily smiled and headed for the kitchen. "The cranberry sauce is already done." Having Sarah and Dan's family over for dinner was a new tradition for this year's Thanksgiving. Sarah had been a colleague at the company, but as Emily overcame her difficult period, she had become a true friend. Sarah's husband, Dan, and their two children had also welcomed Emily as part of their family. Over the past year, there had been numerous contacts from Martha and Jessica. Letters of apology, offers of reconciliation, and sometimes angry messages. Emily had processed most of them through her lawyer, avoiding direct contact. Occasionally, she felt loneliness deep in her heart, but she understood that it was a sensation coming from years of habit, not genuine loss. Her mother and sister had been forced to rebuild their lives afterward. Martha had moved to a small apartment and begun a frugal life for the first time. Jessica's relationship with her husband had deteriorated, eventually leading to divorce. With two children, she was now working multiple part-time jobs. Emily sometimes thought about her niece and nephew. They were innocent. She had anonymously established an educational trust fund to secure their college funds. That was the only way she could be involved. The intercom rang. Sarah's family had arrived. "May we come in?" Sarah's husband. Dan's cheerful voice echoed in the apartment. The children, Ellie and Jake, also rushed in energetically, and Emily. Ellie hugged her this term and represented a relationship bound by genuine affection without blood ties. At dinner, while carving the turkey, Sarah said, "This is a special Thanksgiving." "In what way?" Emily asked. "Because you've become part of our family." Sarah smiled. "You've taught us that blood ties aren't necessary for a true family." Dan also raised his glass, with Emily joining us. "Our Thanksgiving has become more special." Emily was too moved to speak. Tears welled up in her eyes. "You are my true family. True family isn't about blood ties, but heart connections." Emily finally managed to say, with the sky changing from evening to night in the background. Laughter and conversation resonated in the warm apartment. Emily was experiencing a truly happy Thanksgiving for the first time. Her new chapter in life was filled with true freedom from false bonds and connections with people she could genuinely trust. The first snow of the season began to fall outside the window, holding her wine glass. Emily was confident she had no regrets about her choices. Sometimes life takes unexpected turns and can be painful, but she knew that new paths open up beyond that pain. Happy Thanksgiving, Sarah whispered to her. Thank you, Emily replied with a heartfelt smile. This is the first Thanksgiving